Hey guys, this is Audiobook is live. For this audiobook right here on Superfans, the Superfan ITO system, some chapters gonna be skipped because it's too close to the beginning, and I don't want YouTube to take me down again for a week. So, some chapters are gonna be skipped. But if you don't want the chapters, you want the unfiltered ones, join my Patreon. And if it doesn't match what you saw on 200 chapter 200 to now to the next chapter, simply I skip it because one is going to get me cut. So don't worry. After this, if there's it cannot have R18 content in the first couple chapters of the beginning of the beginning of the audiobook because of YouTube. If you don't like that, I cannot do nothing. Blame YouTube. If you want the unfiltered, join Patreon. Is unfiltered. I don't care. We are all adults here. Anyway, thank you. Have a good day, guys. Bye.
The next morning, Don didn't wake up at his usual time to do his morning routine. This was because he hadn't set an alarm, as he didn't want to interfere with the assimilation process of his new powers. Instead, he was awoken by a loud knocking on his door. Knock knock, huh? He quickly lifted his head off the pillow, initially alert but soon relaxing after realizing it was just knock on the door. He yawned and groggily got out of bed, not even bothering to get dressed as he walked to the door and opened it. What greeted him was a grumpy Summer, already dressed in her school uniform. She wore a frown and had her arms crossed under her chest. Once she caught sight of Don, she furrowed her brows and asked, "Are you sick or something? You should have been up ages ago." "What's got her so uptight this early?" Don wondered, using one hand to rub his eyes before replying, "I was tired, from dealing with a weird church cult." Using this as his reason, Don made Summer feel a little bad. But she remained stubborn and just huffed. "Well, how am I supposed to know when you didn't bother telling me what happened?" "So that's what she's angry about? Women, man." Don just sighed and didn't argue, finding it too early to begin bickering with her. Instead, he just conceded. "Fair point, I guess." "Is that all you wanted to tell me? Or did you just want to see my beautiful face?" Summer narrowed her eyes at him and clicked her tongue in irritation. "Would it kill you to say thanks for waking me up, sis?" "Whatever, I just wanted to remind you to remember our deal. When I text you to pick me up, you better be there." Don looked a bit confused hearing this and shrugged his shoulders. "With what car?" "I haven't gotten it fixed yet." "Or do you want me to fly there?" Summer didn't appreciate Don's sarcasm, but he did have a point. She had been so eager to have him pick her up that she had forgotten about that little important detail. Of course, she wouldn't let him know this, so she just tried to play it off. "I know that, I was just reminding you in case you get it fixed today." "Whatever, I'm leaving," she stated with a scoff before turning on her heel and walking away. However, Don noticed the slight blush on her face and knew she was just acting. And as tempting as it was to tease her, he knew it would only lead to more bickering, so he just let her leave while shaking his head. As soon as she was out of view, Don closed the door to his room and turned his attention to his own body, wondering, did the powers manage to assimilate? As soon as that thought crossed his mind, a system prompt flashed in front of him. Beast shift powers successfully assimilated. Status: inactive. Activate command, beast shift. Don smiled upon looking at this prompt. "I guess that answers that." After he finished reading, the prompt vanished, and he turned his attention to his body while muttering, "Beast shift." However, nothing happened. He showed a slightly perplexed expression and looked over his own body but couldn't see any noticeable difference. Did it not work? He asked himself as he proceeded to clench his fist. However, upon doing this, he felt a strange sensation in his arms as they tensed up, with the veins becoming more prominent. "Whoa," he muttered, able to feel the intense pressure that was building up in his hand. That feeling alone was more than enough to tell him that if he decided to throw a punch using that hand, it would end badly for his room. Let's save testing this out for later. Don was fairly excited about trying out the powers and now looked forward to the day even more. Not wasting any time, he quickly took a shower, got dressed, and carried his student ID in hand, as well as his EHP Elite Hero Program ID, just in case. With all that done, he was ready for his day, so he made his way downstairs, where he found Samantha and Amanda sitting at the dining table having breakfast. Samantha was dressed in a crisp dark blue office suit, composed of a white button-up shirt, a navy blazer on top, an office skirt of the same color, black pantyhose, and black-heeled office shoes. She had her hair combed neatly into a styled ponytail that looked professional. She also wore a reasonable amount of makeup to complete the look. Sitting to her side, Amanda was still clearly in her sleeping attire, loose shorts and a loose vest, incredibly simple but very ideal for someone with a body shape like hers. Once Don appeared in the doorway, they both looked his way with smiles, with Amanda being the first to speak. "Morning, Donnie. Didn't expect you to sleep in." Before Don could answer, Samantha also gave her greeting. "Morning, sweetie. Come join us, I put your food in the microwave." "Good morning to you too, ladies." Don smiled and returned the greetings while walking toward the microwave and the kitchen, just next to the dining area. He quickly retrieved the plate that had simple bacon, eggs, and toast on it and took his seat at the dining table, opposite Samantha. Once seated, he looked toward Amanda and decided to answer her question. "Well, I slept in today because I honestly had too good a sleep. My body was so relaxed that I felt like I had melted into my bed." Samantha visibly smiled at hearing this, as she immediately associated what he was describing with the massage and help she gave him. This was exactly what Don was hinting at, but he was careful not to make it obvious, quickly changing the topic right after as he began to dig into his meal. "So, what do you guys have planned for the day?" Samantha took a sip of the orange juice next to her before answering first. "Oh, I'll just be at the office until about 2 p.m. Then I think I'll just do a little grocery shopping and come back here." Nothing exciting. From the way Samantha spoke, it was clear she wasn't that happy about going back to work. It wasn't something Don wanted to see, but it also meant he didn't have to worry about her finding enjoyment elsewhere while he was still building his relationship with her. To try and make her feel better, he smiled at her and suggested, "Maybe if I come back early, we can do something fun." Don actually meant it that way, but Samantha took it a little differently, given what happened between them last night. What kind?" She also felt she might be reading too much into the words, so she asked just to be sure. Don nonchalantly shrugged before replying, "I don't know, we'll figure something out." "Depends on what you consider fun, I guess." Amanda suddenly burst into laughter, holding her stomach and shaking her head as she said to Don, "I think you're asking the wrong person about fun, Donnie. Hey, I can be very fun." Samantha narrowed her eyes at Amanda and immediately defended herself, but Amanda just kept laughing while nodding sarcastically. Sure. I must have you mistaken with my other boring sister." Samantha just huffed at Amanda's teasing and turned her attention back to Don. "Don't listen to her, honey. I'd love to do something fun with you after work. Speaking of, I better get going." After saying this, she stood up from her seat and was about to take her leave but then paused as if remembering something. "Oh, will you be needing a lift, sweetie, since your car has problems and all?" That was actually a good point that Don had forgotten about. He swallowed the food currently in his mouth before replying, "I might." "Let me just confirm with Donald first. I could just go with him." Don reached into his pocket and took out his phone before calling Donald. It only rang for a few seconds before he picked up. "Hello? Morning, man. Listen, I wanted to ask if we can go to school together. That is, if you haven't gone already." "Oh yeah, I thought that was already the plan. Mom already said I could have the car today. She's on one of her self-care days or something." "All right, great. I'll meet you in the next 20 minutes or so then." "No problem." Click with that, Don ended the call. After ending the call with Donald, Don turned his attention back to Samantha. "Donald says it's cool if I go with him," Don revealed with a small smile as he put away his phone and continued to eat. Samantha nodded at this. "All right then. I'll deposit some money into your account later so you can get your car checked and BZZ." Before Samantha could finish her sentence, her phone buzzed from inside her purse, which was resting atop a nearby counter. "Oh, It must be work. One moment, honey. After saying this, she took her phone from the purse and quickly walked out of the dining area to answer it. Now alone with Amanda, Don turned his attention to her and asked, "What do you have planned for your day, Aunt Amanda?" "More bikini mud wrestling?" Amanda smiled at the question but shook her head, feigning a disappointed look as she replied in a low tone, "I wish. I need to head to the farm and check on my crops and see how the house repairs are coming along." Remembering what had happened there, Don didn't like the idea of her heading there alone. "You should take Winter with you. You know, just in case what happened repeats itself, and I'm not there to help," he suggested. Amanda's smile grew, and she seemed touched by the sentiment. She had no reason to refuse, so she agreed with a nod. "That would help me feel more at ease with going back there, if I'm being honest." "Thanks, Donnie." "No problem," Don replied, before turning his head to look around the area and asking, "Speaking of, where is Winter?" Amanda took a sip of the glass of juice next to her while pointing in the direction of the hallway. "She was doing some cleaning last I checked, but I think she stepped outside when Summer was leaving to take care of the outside too. I'm kinda jealous, if I'm being honest. If I had a farm helper like her, I'd be relaxing every day." Haha. Don pretended to act hurt at hearing this. "Wow, am I not good enough?" Amanda laughed at this before shaking her head and playing along. "Oh, don't be like that. You know I'd pick you over anyone to help me on the farm. Just don't cry when you're sore all over from back-breaking labor." Don simply shrugged this off. "That just means I get a free massage from you." "I see that as a win." Amanda raised her eyebrow at this statement and showed a mischievous grin as she decided to take the teasing up a notch. Well, if you really impress me, I'll give you something even better than a boring old massage." Don nearly choked on the food he was chewing as he heard her say this. But he quickly recovered and swallowed hard before replying, "I've changed my mind. Take me instead of Winter. I'll finish repairing your house yesterday." These exaggerated words made Amanda break into laughter again. It was this habit of always responding to her teasing with matching energy that made Don so likable to her. She always felt he truly understood her playful nature. "A tempting offer, but I'll have to decline. Sam won't let you off if you miss school, and I can't have her grounding my little farm worker now, can I?" Before Don could reply, Samantha came strutting back into the kitchen with a bit of urgency, stopping right next to Don, still holding her phone in hand. "Donnie, why didn't you tell me that today is your evaluation day?" Samantha asked in a mildly surprised tone. Her question only made Don look at her with confusion as he asked, "It's my evaluation day?" "Yes," Samantha reaffirmed. "I just got off the phone with Claire. She said the agency sent her an email saying she should forward them your results from today's evaluation. All candidates in the Elite Hero program get evaluated on the opening day." "Didn't you get an email from your school?" "Honestly, I forgot I even had an email in this world," Don thought, but on the surface, he maintained his confused expression. "Maybe I did, but when I registered, I wasn't yet a candidate in the program." "So, maybe they don't know?" This wasn't Don's first time dealing with parents when it came to university matters, so he could flow out excuses like water. Quite frankly, he didn't know about such a thing. Luckily for him, Samantha had enough trust in him not to doubt his words. After all, the excuse seemed very plausible. "That must be it." "Well, the evaluation starts at 10 a.m., so you're not late. But that means I won't be able to attend like other parents since I already committed to going to work today. We don't even have a flashy hero suit for you like the ones other candidates wear." Samantha seemed visibly upset over this. From what Don could gather, it seemed like a major event. He could only compare it to the open days in his former life, where schools showcased their national talents in certain sports. Amanda was also surprised by the news and chimed in. "Wait. Does that mean he's going to be on TV? I haven't watched a hero open day evaluation in years, but they're still huge, aren't they? Especially for a school like SHU." "Congrats, Donnie." Thanks." Don was still puzzled by this unexpected development and didn't know how to react. Was it a good or a bad thing? Samantha, on the other hand, was racking her brain for a solution. "Maybe I can ask Fabio if one of his superhero suit designer friends has something you can wear." "I don't know, This is just such short notice. Is it mandatory to wear a superhero suit? Don asked, genuinely curious. Samantha shook her head, though she looked unsure as she replied, from what I know, it's not. But don't you want a cool suit like the others? I know it's good for building an image early and even getting some professional superheroes to scout you. Well, that does sound like I'd be missing out, but I don't want to half-ass it either. As Don was thinking this, Amanda made another suggestion. Can't he just wear those standard suits the other regular students wear during their evaluations? I honestly doubt it will really hurt his image. As for watching, just sneak out to the bathroom and stream it on your phone, Sam, easy peasy. Don had no idea what these standard suits were, but her suggestion seemed reasonable enough. As for his image, he basically didn't have one yet as Don, so why stress? I don't mind wearing a standard suit, Mum. It's no big deal, Don decided. This brought some relief to Samantha, and it was true that she could stream it, so she didn't bother pressing the matter. All right, honey, I'll make sure to watch you, okay? So just try your best, Samantha urged before leaning in to give Don a kiss on the cheek. As she pulled away and looked ready to leave, she added, make sure you call Miss Claire to tell her about your results. Bye, honey. With that, Samantha turned and left, leaving Don and Amanda alone once again. Once Don heard Samantha make her exit from the house, he turned to look at Amanda and asked with a playful grin, where's my good luck kiss? Amanda simply raised an eyebrow at him before smiling eagerly. After saying his goodbyes to Amanda, Don stepped outside the house, the morning air cool against his skin. As he made his way down the steps, he paused to look at himself on his phone's reflection. Visible kiss marks dotted his neck, cheek, and forehead. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I walked into that one, I guess, he thought, shaking his head with a faint smile. His attention then shifted to Winter, who was raking leaves in the front yard, with the HUSKY android next to her. The robotic dog was behaving just like its namesake, occasionally pouncing at stray leaves in a way that almost looked playful. As Don approached, Winter paused her raking, turning toward him. Her posture was straight and her movements precise as she walked over to greet him. Good morning, Don, she greeted, her tone as emotionless as always. Are you also going to school today? Don nodded. Yeah, first day of university. His voice was casual, but he was still a bit distracted by the kiss marks. Let's hope most people miss this, he thought, his hand briefly brushing over his neck. I see, Winter replied. Meanwhile, the husky trotted over, its tail like appendage wagging as it approached Don. It sat down at his feet, looking up at him expectantly with glowing eyes, mimicking the behavior of a real dog. Don couldn't help but grin as he looked down at the android. I can't get over how much of real dog it looks like. Winter nodded. I was able to successfully upload HUSKY with the appropriate information and updated its behavioral algorithms. It should now act much more like a real dog and be far more responsive to orders. Don's interest peaked. Really? He decided to test it. Husky, sit. Without hesitation, the husky sat down obediently, its mechanical movements smooth and natural. Don nodded in approval. Wow, nice. That'll save us a lot of trouble. Winter nodded once more. Indeed. After a moment, Winter's gaze flicked toward Don again. Will you require my presence at your school today? Don shook his head. No, actually, I was hoping you'd escort Amanda when she goes to the farm later. I'd feel better knowing you were there to look after her. Winter's head tilted slightly. Are there any specific dangers on the farm that I should be aware of? Mutants, Don replied simply. Affirmative, Winter said, her face unreadable as always. I will ensure her safety and monitor the house remotely through HUSKY. Don raised an eyebrow. You can do that? He paused before shaking his head with a small laugh. Never mind, of course you can. Winter nodded. I will remain in contact. Have a safe journey, Don. Thanks, Don said, smiling at her as he walked toward the gate. Contact me if anything comes up. Not a problem, Winter replied. Safe travels. With that, Don stepped out onto the sidewalk, closing the gate behind him. He then headed toward Donald's house next door. As he walked, he kept an eye out for any strange occurrences, but everything seemed quiet and normal. Just another day in the neighborhood. After a short walk, Don spotted Cassie's G-Wagon pulling out of the driveway. Donald was behind the wheel, and when he noticed Don on the sidewalk, he waved him over. Don jogged the rest of the way and climbed into the passenger seat, closing the door with a solid thunk. "Morning," Don greeted as he adjusted his seatbelt. "Morning," Donald replied, though his voice was weak, and his eyes were bloodshot and tired. He slumped slightly against the steering wheel, his exhaustion evident. Don narrowed his eyes, noticing how out of it Donald looked. "Did you get any sleep, man? You look tired as hell." Donald sighed deeply, his head resting against the steering wheel for a moment before he shook it. "I tried, but a broken bar. I just couldn't get what happened yesterday out of my mind. Believe me, if you saw for yourself what was in that fucking hole at the church, you wouldn't be able to sleep either." He sighed again, rubbing his face as if trying to shake off the memories. Don, who had indeed seen what was down there using his shadow presence, nodded sympathetically. He understood the things they had seen were not something most people could just brush off. If it weren't for his unfazed trait and how quickly he was adapting to this crazy new world, he might have been just as shaken. "He'll probably need a few days to get back to normal," Don thought. "I get it," Don said after a moment, offering a small smile. "Why don't I drive for a bit? You look like you could use a break." Donald blinked at him, surprised but clearly grateful. "Yeah, broken bar. That's probably for the best." "Thanks, man." They both stepped out of the car and swapped seats, Donald groaning a little as he stretched his back. Once Don was settled behind the wheel, he started the car with a low rumble and smoothly pulled away from the curb, driving them down the quiet street. Donald leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment. "You're a lifesaver, man," Don chuckled as they cruised down the road. "Yeah, well, don't get too comfortable. I'm not your chauffeur." Donald cracked a tired smile but didn't respond. As Don drove the G-Wagon away out of the Chanel Hills community, he decided to spark up a conversation, keeping the mood light despite the heavy thoughts looming over both of them. "By the way, man, did you know today is evaluation day for candidates in the Elite Hero program?" Donald, who had been dozing off from the lack of sleep, jerked upright. "Huh? Really?" he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "That explains all the hype I saw on the gram last night about watching today's evaluations." He sighed heavily, slumping back into his seat. "That means the school's gonna be packed with content creators and scouts. Just what I need," he added sarcastically, rubbing his eyes. Don chuckled softly, glancing at him out of the corner of his eye. "So, what are these evaluations usually like?" "I only found out this morning that I'll need to attend." "Oh, right, I almost forgot you're a candidate too," Donald replied, his voice perking up slightly. "Most of them are full of assholes who act like they're too good to talk to regular students. Some of them come from superhero lineages, so they're all uptight and not exactly social." He sighed, clearly not a fan of that group. Donald continued, "I've watched a bunch of ceremonies over the last few years. It's usually the same thing: a flashy hero suits, people going ooh and ah over the next big hero. But most of them go quiet by second or third year and end up relocating after getting offers from bigger agencies in other cities or being recruited by professional heroes." Don raised an eyebrow at this information, amused by how much of a show it seemed to be. "Sounds like a whole business," he commented. Donald nodded tiredly, leaning back against the seat. "Pretty much. It's all a game of publicity. You know, getting scouted, building your image." Suddenly, Donald narrowed his eyes at Don, scanning him with a suspicious look. "Wait a minute. Where's your costume?" Don gave a weary smile as they finally arrived at the university, which was bustling with cars and people all trying to enter through the main gates. "I don't have one. I'll just be wearing a standard suit." Donald blinked in surprise. "You'll be the only one, then." "I can't remember the last time a candidate did their evaluation in a standard training suit." Don shrugged, unfazed. "It's no big deal." Donald didn't press the issue and just looked at the sea of vehicles and the chaos at the gates. "Man, we're gonna be stuck here for a while," he sighed, sinking deeper into his seat. And he was right. They crawled forward at a snail's pace, waiting in line with dozens of other cars. To pass the time, Donald kept talking, sharing more details about how evaluations typically went. He pointed out that not everyone participating today was a candidate for the Elite Hero Program, EHP. Instead, they were just the most talented individuals coming to the school. There are less than 5 EHP members at our school, Donald explained, 6, counting you. And get this, it's not even mandatory for EHP candidates to do the evaluation. Just being a candidate is proof enough of your ability. Only 2 or 3 ever bother doing it, and it's usually just to show off or get views for the school. They get paid for it, too. Don absorbed the information, leaning back against the driver's seat. Well shit, I'm not getting paid, he thought as the line finally inched forward, bringing them closer to the gate. After what felt like forever, they reached the front of the line, stopping at the booth where a stern-looking security guard stood, overseeing the vehicles entering the campus. The guard gave them a hard look, eyeing the G-Wagon before speaking. ID please. Don rolled down the window and handed over his EHP ID. The guard inspected it, his face tightening into a suspicious frown. Is this a fake? Don remained calm, keeping his tone casual. It's real. Feel free to confirm with the agency if you want. The guard eyed Don for another moment before stepping away to make a call. The wait was only a few minutes, but it felt longer with the cars behind them getting restless. Finally, the guard returned, his entire demeanor changed. Sorry for the delay, sir, he said politely, handing back the ID. Please go in. Don nodded, suppressing a smirk as he started the car again. No problem, he replied, driving past the gates. As they rolled onto the campus, Donald shook his head in disbelief. Man, he switched up quick. I'm really jealous how you EHP guys get treated. Don grinned, his eyes on the road ahead. Don't be. Trust me, it's not always fun being under the microscope. They drove through the now less congested campus roads, eventually parking near one of the designated areas for students. As Don turned off the engine, he glanced at the time on the dashboard. We still have some time to kill before the ceremony starts, right? Is there anything we need to get done? Donald rubbed his eyes and stretched, still tired from his lack of sleep. Nah, not really. Maybe grab a coffee or something? He yawned. I could definitely use one. Don chuckled, unbuckling his seatbelt. Alright, let's go grab some coffee then. Don and Donald found themselves seated outside the Moonbucks Cafe / copyright on campus. The morning sun had risen just high enough to give everything a warm glow, and the tables around them were filled with students and parents alike, all enjoying their drinks and food in the fresh air. Don sat opposite Donald, casually sipping on a smaller coffee while a plate of muffins rested on the table beside him. Donald, on the other hand, was gripping a huge coffee cup, still looking like he'd just stumbled out of a long night shift, his eyes heavy and still showing signs of great exhaustion. At first, Don had been focused on his phone, scrolling through a summarized explanation about how powers were classified. AAA, D-Class, Minor Abilities. Definition: the weakest level of a power, D-Class abilities are considered low impact and often have little effect in combat or other high-intensity scenarios. Example: speed. A person can run slightly faster than a peak human athlete but is still within human limitations, around 20 to 30 miles per hour. Strength. Capable of lifting around 200–500 pounds, which is impressive but still within the realm of human achievement. Utility. These powers might provide a minor edge in specific situations but are generally not significant enough to turn the tide of major conflicts. C-Class, Enhanced Human Abilities. Definition: C-Class abilities are those that surpass human potential, making them useful but not overwhelmingly powerful. Example: speed. The person can run at speeds comparable to a high-speed vehicle, 60 to 120 miles per hour. Strength. Can lift up to a ton, allowing for feats like flipping cars or breaking through reinforced doors. Utility. Useful in day-to-day tasks or small skirmishes, but these powers will struggle against highly powered foes. B-Class, Superhuman Abilities. Definition: these abilities begin to push the boundaries of human limitations, falling firmly in the realm of what one might call superhuman. Example: speed. Capable of moving at Mach 1, the speed of sound, allowing the person to cover vast distances quickly. Strength, can lift several tons, capable of destroying large structures or significantly altering the environment, for example, smashing through concrete walls. Utility, B-class abilities are formidable in most combat situations and provide a clear advantage over ordinary or enhanced human opponents. A-class, high-level superhuman abilities. Definition: A-class powers represent mastery and extreme potency in a given field. These abilities can dominate most combat scenarios and exert significant influence over the environment or opponents. Example: Speed, can run at hypersonic speeds, capable of easily outrunning missiles or traveling across a country in minutes. Strength, can lift buildings or punch through military-grade materials, for example, tanks, steel reinforcements. Utility, often considered elite, these powers can drastically alter the balance in any given confrontation. S-class, near-godlike abilities. Definition: S-class abilities are world-shaking, with few limitations. These powers often define the top tier of most superhuman rankings, reserved for those who can stand against armies or cause mass destruction with ease. Example: Speed, can move at near light speeds, making the person nearly impossible to detect or track by normal means. Strength, can lift mountains or perform feats that alter landscapes, for example, triggering earthquakes with a punch. Utility, S-class abilities are typically feared and respected, as they can decide the fate of cities or even nations in moments. SS-class, beyond the limits of reality. Definition: SS-class powers are essentially god-tier abilities, often bending or breaking the natural laws of the universe. These powers can have universal or even multiversal effects, making them extraordinarily rare. Example: Speed, capable of instantaneous travel, breaking time and space barriers, and existing in multiple places at once. Strength, can lift celestial bodies or affect entire planets with their physical power, reshaping reality itself. Utility, SS-class abilities are capable of catastrophic feats, often leading to world-ending scenarios or cosmic-level events. Class ranking requirements. Each power has its own unique set of requirements for ranking, which varies depending on the nation or institution. For example, Speed might focus on the ability to break certain velocity thresholds, such as breaking the sound barrier for B-class or reaching light speed for SS-class. Strength might require lifting certain weights or demonstrating a level of impact, for example, breaking concrete, destroying armored vehicles. Energy projection could be ranked based on the destructive force, for example, the ability to blow up a car for C-class, or a building for A-class. His eyes moved across the screen as he mentally filed the information away. It was all pretty straightforward. Our powers were ranked from Class D to SS, with each power being classified individually. As he read, he couldn't help but wonder where his new beast shift abilities would place him, though given the descriptions of the powers he'd gain, he was sure it was no less than B at least. Just as he was about to dive deeper into it, his superhuman hearing picked up on the conversations of the people around them. Nearly every group was talking about the same thing, the upcoming evaluation. One name, in particular, kept coming up again and again as Starboy. Curious, Don glanced up from his phone and casually asked Donald, "Can you tell me about Starboy?" Donald, who was taking a long sip of his coffee, blinked, looking like he was coming out of a daze. "Huh? Oh, yeah, sure. But how do you not know about that guy?" Donald sounded genuinely surprised. "He's one of the few in the Elite Hero program actually taking part in today's evaluation. I joined late," Don explained with a shrug. "I haven't met any of the other members yet." Donald nodded in understanding. "Oh, I see. Well, there's not much I can tell you that you won't find plastered all over his damn website, fan page, or YouTube channel." Donald's tone shifted, becoming noticeably more irritated as he spoke about the guy. "Like seriously, I know I don't like stuck-up privileged guys in general, but that guy is really something. He's the son of Starman, but he's got twice the ego of his old man. And unfortunately, he's got the powers to back it up." Don leaned in slightly, intrigued despite himself. "What's he got?" Donald took another sip of his coffee before continuing. "Speed, Class C, Strength, Class B. Durability, also Class B, but almost day at night when the skies are clear. Oh, and he can fly. Basically, he's the perfect stereotypical vanguard hero, like someone out of a comic book. Think Red Star, but weaker and without the discipline or the proper training. He's our so-called city treasure, but if you ask me, he's an ass, and for all I care, he can kiss Ma. Before Donald could finish his rant, excited screams erupted from further down the campus street they were on. Both Don and Donald turned their heads to see what was causing the commotion. A group of women and even a few guys were running toward a young man guarded by several bodyguards dressed in bright white suits. The crowd was trying to get close, phones in hand, as they snapped pictures and yelled his name. Starboy. Starboy. Can I get an autograph? Oh my God. It's really him. Donald frowned, his face immediately souring. Speak of the devil. Don raised an eyebrow, still looking in the direction of the commotion. Is that him? Yup, Donald replied, his voice full of annoyance. In the flashy flesh, Don's eyes focused on the scene ahead of them, and he could see what Donald meant. If the 8 matching bodyguards in their white suits and sunglasses weren't enough of a spectacle, the main attraction at the center of it all certainly was. Starboy stood out like a beacon. His costume was a flashy, skin-tight gold suit with star-like patterns scattered across the cape and a large star emblem emblazoned on his chest. His long blonde hair flowed almost theatrically, and he wore sleek silver visors that completed the look. The whole outfit had a familiar, iconic designer like something out of a heroic comic book, but turned up to 11. He waved to the crowd, his smile perfect, as if he knew he was the star of the show. Thank you all for coming. Starboy called out in a condescending tone, his voice carrying a tone of self-importance. Your support means the world to me. As he passed by the cafe copyright, people whipped out their phones, frantically snapping photos of him. Donald just scoffed, folding his arms as he watched the scene unfold. I don't get why people go crazy over him. Sure, he's got talent, but if you ask me, he's nothing special. No sooner had Donald finished speaking than Starboy suddenly stopped. The bodyguards halted in sync, as if they'd rehearsed the move 1,000 times. Starboy then hovered a few feet above the ground, rising effortlessly into the air, his cape billowing dramatically behind him. He took off his silver visors, revealing bright, glowing eyes with star-shaped pupils that seemed to radiate energy. His voice boomed out, deeper and the more intense than before. Who said that? Don raised an eyebrow, his fingers tightening slightly around the handle of his coffee cup. Really? He's got super hearing too? He thought, amused. Meanwhile, Donald shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing nervously at the hovering figure above them. The crowd fell silent, their attention now fully focused on Starboy as he scanned the area. His star-shaped pupils narrowed as if searching for the source of the comment. There was an eerie stillness in the air, the playful excitement of moments ago replaced by a tense, uncomfortable silence. Don didn't flinch, remaining calm as he casually reached for a muffin from his plate. Let's see where this goes. As Starboy hovered in the air, murmurs spread through the crowd. Most of them seemed confused, clearly not having heard anything that warranted the sudden confrontation. Suddenly, someone in the crowd behind Starboy raised their hand. Both Don and Donald looked surprised, though Donald's reaction was more obvious as his eyes widened in shock. Starboy turned toward the raised hand, his body gliding effortlessly in the air as people in the crowd parted to reveal the person behind the gesture. It was a girl, young, with big round glasses perched on her nose and short, slightly messy hair. Her attire was colorful and eclectic, a chaotic mix of patterns and shades that looked more like a statement than a fashion choice. The bright colors stood out against the more subdued tones of those around her, making her even more noticeable. Starboy frowned in confusion, tilting his head slightly as he fixed his gaze on her. Was it you? He asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of someone used to being answered immediately. The girl adjusted her glasses and lowered her hand, shaking her head nonchalantly. No, she replied, her voice clear and confident. But I can point out who said it. My hearing's that good I can distinguish all the voices present here, so it's no problem at all for me, she added, clearly proud of herself. Starboy's smile returned, though it was thin and less amused than before. He didn't look particularly impressed, but he played along. "Well then, point them out," he said, waving a hand as if this whole thing was a minor inconvenience. But to his and the crowd's surprise, the girl crossed her arms and smirked while shaking her head. "Number, at least not for free." The crowd reacted with surprise, and some of the girls near her scowled, immediately jumping on her defiance. "Who do you think you are?" one of them yelled. "Yeah, if Starboy asks you a question, you answer," another delusional one chimed in. "What a pick-me girl," someone sneered. "Ha, she must think he'd reward her for something so dumb," added another, eliciting a round of giggles from the onlookers. Despite the barrage of insults, the girl maintained her composure, unfazed by the comments. She stood her ground with a small, amused smile, as if enjoying the moment. Donald, sitting beside Don, glanced over with a nervous expression, the fatigue on his face momentarily forgotten. "BSST," he whispered, trying to get Don's attention. When Don looked over, Donald frantically gestured with his hands for them to make a quick escape. He really wasn't liking the direction things were going in. Don chuckled softly, shaking his head and giving Donald a calming gesture. "Relax," his expression seemed to say. Donald could only curse his big mouth inwardly. Starboy, still hovering above, smiled down at the girl. "Fine," he said, clearly entertained by her boldness. "I'll play along." "What do you want?" The girl's grin widened, and without missing a beat, she answered, 2 liters of your bath water." A broken bar. The already hushed crowd fell into an even deeper silence. The absurdity of her request left everyone momentarily speechless until a voice from the crowd finally expressed their surprise. "Ayo, what the fuck?" the person muttered, capturing the bewildered vibe of the other onlookers. Starboy's brows furrowed for a brief moment, clearly thrown off by the bizarre request. But his confusion didn't last long. His smile returned, more forced this time, as he nodded. "If that's your wish," he said, his tone full of condescension. "Now tell me quickly, I have more important things to do." The girl didn't hesitate. She raised her hand once more and pointed directly in Don and Donald's direction. "There," she said, her finger specifically targeted on Donald. The one with the glasses said it. Donald's heart sank, and he visibly stiffened in his seat, his face going pale as Starboy's gaze snapped to their position. With incredible speed, Starboy shot toward them, the sudden movement causing the umbrellas over the nearby tables to rattle and whip in the gust of air he left in his wake. Donald began to sweat like he had just run a marathon, his eyes wide as Starboy lowered himself slowly to the ground, his feet hovering just inches above the pavement. He loomed over them, his glowing eyes locked onto Donald. "Repeat what you said about me," Starboy demanded, his voice cold and commanding despite the smile he still had plastered on his face. Donald opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was frozen, caught like a deer in headlights, and for a moment, it seemed like he might pass out from sheer anxiety. To Donald's utter shock, it was Don who spoke up, his voice calm and steady. "He said you're talented but nothing special." "And I agree." Donald's head snapped toward Don, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" His expression seemed to scream, though his mouth only hung open and no words were said. Starboy's attention shifted to Don, his star-shaped pupils narrowing as he scrutinized him. The tense silence hung in the air for a moment before Starboy suddenly laughed. The sound was loud and grating, and as he looked around at the crowd, his voice boomed again. "Did you all hear that? These two think I'm nothing special." He spread his arms wide, his cape billowing as he hovered just above the ground. "Well, maybe they're right." He turned back to Don, his smile twisting into something more sinister. "You must be really special yourself to think that, right?" Don remained unfazed, casually taking another sip of his coffee before shaking his head and answering, "Not really. I mean, I might be in the elite hero program, but I don't need to flaunt it. At the end of the day, I know I'm not the strongest in the world." Starboy's eyes flashed as he sized Don up, his smile faltering for a moment. "You?" he said, almost incredulously. "In the elite hero program?" He barked out a laugh, his voice full of mockery. "Do you hear that, Everyone, he waved a hand toward the crowd. This guy thinks we're all stupid. A few people in the crowd joined in with forced laughter, someone even yelling, "Who the heck is he?" Starboy's laughter abruptly stopped, his voice growing darker as he glared at Don. "Do you think this is a joke?" Don didn't even blink, his eyes met Starboy's with a calm, steady gaze as he replied, "If it is, then you must be the punchline." A vein visibly appeared on Starboy's forehead, his smile faltering for just a second as he looked at Don with an expression that screamed he'd enjoy nothing more than punching him square inches the face. But almost as quickly, Starboy composed himself, showing a wide grin and forcing a laugh. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge. "Don Bright," Don replied with a smile of his own, not backing down. Starboy nodded slowly, eyes still locked on Don. "I'll be seeing you around." With that, he hovered away toward his bodyguards, his cape fluttering behind him. But just as he reached his entourage, Don spoke again, this time louder so the crowd could hear. "What's with the ominous threat? Too scared to prove yourself in front of your dumb fans?" The reaction to Don's words was immediate. Anger was felt through Starboy's supporters like a wave, with a few people in the crowd yelling out, "What the fuck did you just say? This guy must be crazy. I'll show you who's boss." Some of Starboy's fans even began moving toward Don, clearly ready to start something. But before they could get close, Starboy raised a hand and yelled, "Stop!" His voice cut through the rising anger like a whip, and his fans immediately froze. He lowered himself fully to the ground, standing only a few feet from Don now. His smile was still plastered on his face, but it was forced, his patience clearly wearing thin. "And what do I have to prove to a nobody like you?" he asked, his voice carrying an undercurrent of barely restrained anger too. Donald, who had been sitting in silent terror, leaned over and whispered urgently, "What are you doing, man?" Don, completely unfazed, didn't answer Donald and just stood up from his seat, his calm demeanor still present. "Prove you're special." He met Starboy's gaze head-on. "Like I said, we're both in the Elite Hero program, so I don't consider you special. But you seem to think I'm wrong, and now your fragile ego's been hurt. So, let's resolve this, because frankly, I don't want to see you or your flashy gay golden suit again." The crowd fell into an awkward silence. Even Starboy's bodyguards exchanged confused glances. The remark about the golden gay suit had hit like a sucker punch, leaving even the crowd unsure of what to say next. A few whispers from onlookers in disbelief broke the silence. "He's crazy, a broken bar. I thought he was just trolling, but he really has a death wish." Starboy's face now darkened, his forced smile finally cracking as anger threatened to spill over. Before he could respond, someone from the crowd yelled out, "Hold on. That guy's telling the truth. He is in the Elite Hero program. Check the page, guys." "But his evaluation is blank." A murmur spread through the crowd as people whipped out their phones to check the information. The revelation seemed to knock some of the wind out of Starboy's sails. He looked less visibly angry, and more confused now. How had he never heard of this guy? He had so many connections in the program. If Don were important, surely he'd know about him by now. Starboy's brows furrowed. "So you're telling the truth about being in the program," he said slowly, trying to piece it together. "But that doesn't change the fact that you're a nobody." Don smirked, leaning slightly to the side as he crossed his arms. "A nobody who might be stronger than you." The crowd, which had previously been riled up against Don, now hesitated. They checked, and Don was indeed in the Elite Hero program. That changed things. Some people began to murmur among themselves, unsure of where they stood. After all, Don clearly had confidence, and without knowing his evaluation results, it was impossible to know how strong he really was. Starboy, on the other hand, didn't like this one bit. His ego wouldn't let him walk away from this now. He refused to believe someone like Don could be better than him. "If you're really that confident, how about we settle this with a bet?" he asked, raising his chin slightly. "Let's see who gets the better results in the evaluation today." The crowd murmured again, and it seemed like a fair challenge. A few people even nodded in agreement, expecting Don to take the bait. But Don shook his head. "Nah," he said casually, much to the crowd's surprise. "I'm more old school. Let's settle this with a simple challenge. One punch, one defense." He held up a finger, making his point clear. "We each get one hit and one chance to defend. Whoever fails to stand upright after the punch loses. Simple. If we both fall, it's a tie, and that just confirms you're nothing special." Starboy's eyes narrowed as Don continued. "But if you win, you'll prove to everyone here that you're really a cut above the rest, even in the elite hero program." "And if I win?" A broken bar. Don trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air with a sly smile. The crowd immediately began to buzz with excitement and curiosity. Starboy now found himself in a tricky situation. His reputation was on the line. Walking away would make it look like he was scared of the challenge, and his ego couldn't handle that. The murmurs of the crowd only added to the pressure, and Starboy could feel the eyes of everyone on him, waiting to see what he'd do next. His fists clenched and his jaw tightened as he weighed his options. But there was no way out that wouldn't damage his reputation. Finally, in the heat of the moment, he replied, "Sounds like a good idea. Let's do it." With the challenge accepted, Don and Starboy stood face to face in the middle of the campus street. The crowd had parted around them, forming a wide circle as people backed up to give the two enough space. Some students even climbed onto the nearby buildings just to get a better view, the excitement radiating through the area. Phones were out everywhere, cameras rolling. What had started as a minor confrontation had now blown into a full-fledged spectacle. The event spread like wildfire across social media platforms, trending faster than anyone expected. Comments poured in on live streams. Vio_0, "This won't end well." A broken bar. Hot_Papichulo, "Anyone else think Starboy is a stupid name?" Leslie Powers, "No one is as flexible as me." Smurge Aisaman, "Add Leslie Powers. Nice try, Diddy." Starboil over 69, "My glorious king Starboy will wreck that guy." Nico Pete, "Add Starboil over 69. Zip up when you're done, bro." Meanwhile, over at Nexus Academy, Summer and Sylvia sat at the back of their class, comfortably lounging during their free reading period. Sylvia perched on the edge of her desk, her legs crossed, while Summer leaned back in her seat with her feet propped up on her table, completely at ease. Sylvia was in the middle of a story, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. "And then I was just like, you, blocked," Sylvia finished, rolling her eyes. Before Summer could respond, a sudden eruption of noise came from the front of the classroom. A group of boys had gathered around a nerdy-looking kid holding up his phone, all of them peering over his shoulder. "Whoa, is that Starboy?" "What's going on?" one of the boys asked, his voice loud with excitement. "Apparently, some rando guy challenged him out of nowhere," another responded. "It's not just a rando, it's a guy in the elite hero program as well," someone else added, causing the group to buzz with even more enthusiasm. "Whoa, this should be good. Who wants to make bets?" a kid at the back called out, leaning over to look at the phone. Sylvia glanced over at the growing crowd, raising an eyebrow. "What are they on about?" she asked, sounding more curious than concerned. Summer shrugged, her expression nonchalant. "Dumb boy stuff, I guess." Suddenly, one of the guys said, "Here's the other guy's profile on the Elite Hero program page. His name's Don Brighter. Never heard of him." The second Summer heard the name, her eyes widened. She immediately shot up from her seat, nearly knocking over her chair as she rushed over to the group. "What did you say?" she demanded, pushing her way through. Sylvia followed closely behind, equally surprised. One of the boys turned around and sneered, "None of your business, princess." Summer's face twisted into a scowl, and for a moment, it looked like she was ready to tear the guy apart. But before she could even open her mouth to retaliate, Sylvia stepped in, crossing her arms and flashing a smirk. "Are you sure it's a good idea to say that to the sister of someone in the elite hero program?" A few of the boys exchanged nervous glances. Two of Summer's classmates, Michael and Jakey, are the same two who had visited her house and met Tonya, suddenly realized the situation. Jake's eyes widened. "Shit, you're right, that is Summer's brother." Michael looked confused. "Your brother is in the elite hero program?" he asked, staring at Summer with surprise. The other boys looked at Summer, their attitudes quickly shifting. The guy who had tried to brush her off immediately looked nervous. "I was just joking, Summer," he stammered. "Please don't tell your brother." Summer crossed her arms, feeling a rush of pride but keeping her expression cool. "Whatever," she muttered, brushing past the boys to get a better look at what was happening on the phone. The nerdy kid holding the phone glanced up at her and then back at the screen, still slightly bewildered. "He doesn't have an evaluation on the page yet. Is he really strong enough to take on Starboy?" Summer's heart pounded a little faster. In truth, she had no idea how strong Don was. She hadn't seen him in action, not like this. But she wouldn't show her doubts to these guys. "Shut up and watch," she snapped, brushing off the question. Sylvia, on the other hand, grinned widely. "Anyone wanna bet against me that he is?" she asked, throwing out the challenge to the group. The guys exchanged looks, none of them willing to put their money on the line now that they knew Don was in the elite hero program. No one spoke up, though a few of them looked like they were reconsidering their earlier assumptions. Back in the crowd surrounding Don and Starboy, phones were raised high in the air to capture every moment of the fascia-off. Starboy stood tall, his posture confident and unshaken, as if he'd already won the challenge in his mind. He wore a smirk that seemed to say, "This will be over in seconds." And truth be told, Don was genuinely surprised at how sure Starboy seemed. "Even I'm not sure I can win this," Don thought, studying the overly confident hero in training in front of him. His mind ticked through the reasons why he'd proposed this challenge in the first place. Letting Donald be humiliated in front of Starboy and his fans would have been a blow not only to Donald but to Don's image as well, especially once people learned that he was in the elite hero program too. And if he scored high in his evaluation, people would wonder why he hadn't stepped in. No. Standing up to Starboy here was the least damaging option. Even if he lost, his reputation wouldn't take too much of a hit if he showed courage, and he could always grow stronger later. "Butte a broken bar on the off chance that I'm stronger than him," Don considered. "My reputation could skyrocket." On the surface, Don kept a calm and smug smile on his face, even as he thought through the situation. In truth, he was about 70% confident he could win. His new beast shift ability gave him durability that would help mitigate the worst damage. Plus, even if he lost, it wouldn't be by much, that he was sure of. As they stood facing each other, Starboy opened his arms and declared, "Since I'm so generous, if you can withstand the full force of my punch, I'll publicly admit that you're better than me." "But if you fail," Starboy's grin widened, "you'll grovel and admit that you're nowhere near my level." "What does everyone think?" The crowd roared in agreement, cheers and shouts echoing off the nearby buildings. Don inwardly frowned at the thought of such public humiliation. That wasn't something he could brush off easily. He met Starboy's gaze and answered, "Sounds to me like you're just scared of taking a punch from me." Starboy frowned momentarily before laughing, clearly amused. "Is that what you think? Fine. Then, go ahead, ladies first." He opened his arms wide, as if daring Don to hit him. "I won't even guard against your attack, so please, feel free." Don smiled at this offer. "I'd rather you guard." "Last thing I want is you crying to your daddy that you got hurt." Starboy laughed again, shaking his head. "See the one making excuses?" He spread his arms wider, the crowd eagerly watching every movement. "As members of the elite hero program, we're both allowed to use our powers, so this is nothing more than a friendly, public demonstration. Everyone here is a witness. If either of us gets hurt, it's only a natural consequence of being too weak." Don's smile widened at hearing that. "That's all I needed to hear," he said softly. "Brace yourself." With that, Don took a step forward, muttering under his breath, "Beast shift." He began walking towards Starboy at a steady pace, his focus narrowing in. His body felt the unfamiliar surge of power as his hand started to store energy, building up the pressure that made his arm feel like it might explode. The muscles in his arm tensed, and he could feel the weight of his punch growing with each step he took. Starboy, who stood about 15 centimeters taller than Don, looked down at him and smirked. "You'll regret not using a running start," he taunted. But Don didn't flinch. "And you'll regret not guarding." With that, Don launched his punch, aiming directly for a liver shot. Boom! The moment Don's fist connected with Starboy's side, a sound like a cannon blast erupted across the campus. The sheer force behind Don's punch unleashed energy equivalent to thousands of newtons of force. The shockwave from this radiated outward in a wide arc, rattling the windows of nearby buildings, sending a gust of wind that knocked over chairs, tables, and even some of the students standing too close. Those nearest to the impact zone stumbled backward, many of them falling to the ground entirely, their phones slipping from their hands. Starboy's body reacted violently. His confident smirk vanished the moment Don's punch connected, and his eyes widened in shock. His torso bent inward, the air forced from his lungs with a painful gasp. Whoosh! His body was sent flying backward, his feet leaving the ground as he soared through the air like a ragdoll. He crashed into the pavement several meters away, skidding across the ground and leaving a trail of cracked concrete in his wake. The crowd collectively gasped, some covering their mouths in disbelief at the raw power they had just witnessed. Starboy's durability, rated at Class B, was the only thing keeping his body from being completely shattered by the impact. Even so, he could feel the internal damage. His organs rattled, and the muscles around his side throbbed in agony. He groaned, struggling to lift himself back onto his feet, his legs shaking beneath him. Meanwhile, the area around Don was eerily quiet. The gust of wind that had been unleashed by the punch sent dust swirling around him, but he stood firm, his fist still clenched, his body calm and composed. A few moments later, murmurs spread through the crowd. Did he just do that to Starboy? No way, a broken bar. What kind of power is that? That was insane. Don casually relaxed his stance and glanced at Starboy, who was barely able to stand upright. He locked eyes with him and said in a calm, almost disinterested voice, "I told you you'll regret not guarding." At the Nexus Academy, Summer, Sylvia and all the guys who had been watching the live stream of the face-off had looks of utter shock on their faces. No way, a broken bar. The nerdy-looking boy holding the phone muttered, his hands trembling in disbelief as he looked at Summer who was right beside him. Both Jake and the Michael gulped down mouthfuls of saliva and felt their legs go weak from seeing a young rising hero as powerful as Starboy get sent flying like a ragdoll. Holy shit. One of the more neutral guys who didn't know Don and wasn't really a fan of Starboy either yelled out in surprise. Many of the other guys like him had similar impressions. Summer, what the actual fuck? How's your brother so strong? Another asked, shaking his head at what he just witnessed. Bro could be a pro hero with powers a punch like that. He didn't even get a running start. Imagine if he was serious. A broken bar. Brew a broken bar. One by one, all the guys began to express their reactions on the situation. And though each reaction was different, one with was the same, they were all equally shocked. Summer included. She looked at the screen with wide eyes, her mouth hanging slightly open in disbelief. What the hell? She thought, unable to believe that this was the same brother she had just left home. Sylvia was surprisingly the one who looked the least shocked. She had her arms crossed and her head raised smugly as she boasted, "Told ya guys." "Right, Summer?" As she said this, she hit Summer playfully with her elbow, breaking her out of her daze. Yay. It was pretty obvious Donnie would win a broken bar. Summer quickly agreed, though her tone lacked its usual vigor. Nobody noticed this though, as they were all still processing the shock. And they weren't the only ones. On the various social media platforms that streamed the face-off, there was even more disbelief. Delaygram, Vio_0, Starboy flew so far, I thought he was auditioning for NASA. That I, at Irish_Kings, when you talk big but get sent back to 1997 in one punch. Theo_Diaris's #retro flight. At a raid_crade, I think the real crime here is that golden jumpsuit. He looked like a rejected disco ball before the punch, now he's just a shattered one. At Elite 1993, Starboy's new power, gravitational pull. The way the ground called him back. FY currency pound. FY currency pound. At Devil_Prince, bro was shining like the sun, now he's setting like 1-2 Theo. At Tom_R, gold suit. More like bold choice to get code on live stream. Mask book, at Ethan underscore twos. The way he didn't even flinch before the punch, like, sir, the arrogant Slmao Thy.Aodiaresis at anonymous underscore jokers. Someone check the map, because Starboy just discovered a whole new zip code with that launch eths at Samuel underscore Grayson. That punch gave him a new career. Starboy is a professional air dancer now. Thy superscripto at Smurge Aesaman. He really thought he was invincible until physics came knocking. The at Hyde underscore Zin. Starboy really said no guard needed, and then got guardrailed into next week. Thy currency inverted exclamation mark at Glow underscore King. Starboy's next album dropping soon. Punches and Flight Aoidiaresis Sidilla Thyn at Crown Royal 86, not him matching the shine of his suit with the glimmer of defeat. Aoidiaresis at Hot underscore Papichulo. Starboy when he wakes up, where am I? What year is it? Why am I trending? The Chirper, at Nico underscore Pete. The only thing golden about Starboy is the moment he realized he messed up. The at Bayries. You can literally see the second he knew he wasn't bout that life. At Ethan underscore Stockton. Is this the part where I mentioned that he didn't even guard a broken bar? Or is it too soon? Thy currency at Nick underscore Collins 5343, gold for bravery, platinum for stupidity. Thy at Benjamin underscore Longoria, who needs a superhero cape when you can fly like that with just one punch? Thy no cappy at Cherry0xz, Starboy. More like falling star. Thyoodiaresis Makeovish. Meanwhile, at the very scene itself, Starboy's entourage rushed over to help him up as he was clearly struggling to do so himself. But, as two of the guards held him by the hands to try and lift him up, he angrily swatted them away. Get off me, he barked, managing to barely get on his feet, one hand holding the area Don had punched him. As much as he was trying to stand up straight and pretend he was fine, he was covered in the white dust from the pavement he had cracked, his once long pristine-looking blonde hair now a disheveled mess. His legs were still visibly trembling as well, his body still processing the ferocity of Don's punch. The bodyguards glanced at each other with helpless looks, but before they could offer any more assistance, he angrily yelled at them, "What are you standing there for? Get out of the way. It's not over yet." Starboy's ego was hit the hardest by Don's punch. At most he had expected to maybe feel some pain, not get sent skidding across the pavement in front of all his fans and onlookers present on that campus street. The only way he could salvage the situation was by making Don suffer a worse outcome from his punch. So, while looking at Don with a gaze filled with hatred, he says, "Here I come," before bursting forward with incredible momentum, not even giving Don a chance to ready himself. But Don's reflexes with his beast shift active are fast enough to react, and he brings his hands to his front to guard the attack. Boom! Like with Don's punch, Starboy's also causes a loud noise to boom in the area, though nowhere near as loud as Don's. Same for the after effects. The shockwave and gust of wind caused by it simply moved some already downed light furniture that was already dropped from Don's initial attack. None of the surrounding people were made to fall to the ground either, and their clothes just blew a bit wildly to the violent wind he caused. As for the damage to Donia broken bar, there was none. Once the dust that had risen around the two settled, the onlookers were met with a scene of Don standing firmly in place, with Starboy's fist stopped by his arms, which he raised in front of himself. Aside from some smoke emanating from the point of impact due to the heat generated and some red bruising, Don was uninjured. The sight caused Starboy's fans and other onlookers to show surprise once more. They all knew that this meant it was Don's win. Butte a broken bar, they simply couldn't believe it. Starboy a broken bar, the supposed next star of the city, no pun intended, had lost, quite terribly too. And worst of all, he had done it in front of the whole city. At hold_fool, when your punch sounds like a boom but hits like a whisper, thy negation. At Alfredo_Lozano, he shouted, "Here I come." But all I saw was there he goes. Pilcro Aatm Idiaresis Sidilla Thy Diaresis at Taoistic Don be like you shall not pass, and Starboy really didn't. At Star Gondim, Starboy's brightness levels dropping faster than my phone battery that I @vio_0. Don out here not just crushing villains but egos too these @Nico_Pete. Someone get Starboy a therapist because that ego ain't gonna heal itself. FYI diaresis Sidilla FY section @Devil_Prince. Can't wait for the memes of Starboy's devastating punch that'll fuel my week. Sidilla @Smurge Aesaman. If embarrassment was a superpower, Starboy would be unstoppable. @Tom_R. His fans are as shaken as his legs right now. And thy superscripto. Crown Royal 86. The only thing he managed to punch was a hole in his reputation. Thy negation thighs. @Luis_Gustavo. Someone get this man an ice pack and a reality check. FY section say OI diaresis Adilla. AA. Just like that, Starboy's reputation began falling faster than he could have ever imagined. He stood shocked for a moment, frozen in sheer disbelief that Don had taken his punch without so much as moving back. Starboy was only broken out of his daze when Don finally decided to lower his arms and step back, leaving Starboy's fist positioned as if he was hitting air. I guess it's my win, Don said nonchalantly while casually patting off the dust on his clothes. Starboy looked at him with trembling eyes, feeling humiliated beyond belief by just hearing those words. I lost, he stammered, retracting his hand slowly and bringing his still closed fist toward his face to inspect it. His mind couldn't even react to all this and so he just stood there looking utterly defeated, unable to respond to Don for he didn't know how. From feeling immense confidence, he began to feel anxiousness for what felt like the first time in his life since becoming an adult. He could feel the judging gazes of his fans and even bodyguards on him. He felt like everyone was now inwardly making fun of him, and to some extent, a few but for the most part everyone on the scene was just stunned. Those that did want to laugh used every ounce of their willpower to stop themselves from doing so, because unlike Don, they'd be dead meat if Starboy unleashed his anger onto them. But what Starboy could hear, without a doubt, was the very murmurs and whispers that came from the onlookers and even his fans. Wow, a broken bar. I can't believe he lost that badly. Yeah, broken bar. So much for being the city treasurer. Broken bar. SHH. Quiet mana. Broken bar. He might hear you. So what? Look at him. What a letdown. Maybe the other guy is just super strong? I don't know. Starboy just seemed weaker. Broken bar. Eventually, Starboy had heard enough and his anger boiled over as he yelled, shut up, all of you. Everyone who was whispering immediately shut their mouths and didn't dare utter another word. Starboy's face was twisted into one of clear anger. This, mixed with the sight of his heavy breathing and closed fists, made him look like he was ready to snap. But before he could say or do anything more, a stern masculine voice boomed onto the scene. That's enough. Don, Starboy, and the crowd around them all turned toward the source of the voice. From behind a small group of onlookers, people began to part, revealing an older man with graying hair, a balding crown, and a thick mustache that sat prominently on his chubby, wrinkled face. He wore a brown suit that looked a little too tight around his waist, and as he strode forward, his face was a mix of irritation and forced authority. Who's that? Someone in the crowd murmured, clearly confused by the man's sudden arrival. That's Dean Sanchez, another voice replied. He used to be a superhero. The echo. A few more people nodded in recognition, the murmurs spreading through the gathering. Don stood still, watching the older man approach. He kept his expression steady, unbothered. As far as he was concerned, he hadn't done anything wrong. Sure, the pavement was cracked, and some furniture had been scattered, but considering the situation, it wasn't anything too extreme. Still, the presence of an authority figure made sense given the commotion. In the corner of his eye, Don glanced at Starboy. He half expected some kind of reaction, maybe an acknowledgement to the Dean's arrival or even a sign of frustration. But Starboy wasn't paying attention to the Dean at all. His face was still twisted with anger as he dusted off his suit, the remnants of white debris from the pavement clinging stubbornly to his golden outfit. Dean Sanchez finally stopped once he reached the open space where the confrontation had taken place. The crowd around him fell silent as he took a moment to scan the scene. The cracked concrete, the overturned chairs, the crowd of students still recording on their phones. His gaze shifted from Starboy to Don and back again before he spoke. "What's going on here?" the dean asked, his tone authoritative, though not quite as sharp as one might expect. Starboy, without even looking at the dean, replied in a tone that carried not a hint of respect, just a little friendly exchange between members of the elite hero program. The dean's eyes lingered on Starboy for a moment, then shifted to Don, who stood with his arms crossed, calm and composed. "So he's also in the program?" the dean thought. "Strange. I don't remember him being on the profiles the board sent me." "Must not be important." Starboy probably picked him as an easy target to show off. Poor fellow. The dean hadn't been present for the entirety of the fascia-off, and with Starboy's reputation preceding him, it wasn't hard for Sanchez to jump to his own conclusions. From where he stood, it looked like he'd arrived just in time to stop the situation before things got too out of hand or before Starboy could harm Don. Sanchez sighed internally, already weighing the consequences of how he'd handle this. "If I come down hard on Starboy, the board will give me hell for it." Starboy's status as the city's rising star, not to mention his connections, made him untouchable in many ways. And then there was the matter of the school's image. Starboy brought in attention, sponsorships, and revenue, all things Sanchez was in no position to jeopardize. Clearing his throat, the dean put on a show of authority, knowing exactly where this was headed. "A friendly exchange that led to the damage of school property," he said sternly, glancing over the cracked pavement and broken furniture for effect. "Both of you, follow me to my office." He barely gave Don more than a passing glance, clearly dismissing him as less important. Don simply nodded, thinking, "I guess he has a point." He didn't realize the dean's true motivations, assuming they were just going to get a talking to about the property damage. Starboy scoffed under his breath, clearly unimpressed. With a snap of his fingers, his bodyguard sir, who had been standing off to the side, tense and rigid, immediately moved to surround him. He adjusted his disheveled suit and hair, muttering something under his breath, as he followed the dean without a word. Just as Don was about to turn and follow, he heard rapid footsteps approaching behind him. "Hey, man, wait up." It was Donald, running up with a worried expression on his face. He stopped just beside Don, out of breath but determined. "Are you gonna be alright? This whole thing started because of me, a broken bar. Maybe I should come with you." Don shook his head with a small, reassuring smile. "It's cool, man. I'm the one who suggested the challenge. No point in both of us getting in trouble." Donald hesitated but didn't argue. "You sure? I mean, I feel responsible. If anything serious comes up, I'll let you know. But I think we're just gonna have to pay for the damage," Don said with a shrug. "You can help with that if you want." Donald nodded quickly. "Yeah, of course, man. Just let me know." With that, Don gave him a small nod before turning to follow the dean. As he walked, something shifted in the corner of his vision. Ding. A system prompt flashed into view, its words clear. Massive aura boost gained. Plus 999 aura. Total aura, 1942. Don blinked, keeping his face neutral as he read the notification. He wasn't exactly sure what had triggered the boost, but he assumed it was putting someone of Starboy's status in his place. He pushed the notification aside mentally as he continued walking, not thinking too much on it for now. Behind him, the crowd slowly began to disperse, though their excited whispers and murmurs remained. Phones were still out, recording, and the aftermath of the confrontation had already gone viral across the city. Inside Dean Sanchez's office, the atmosphere was distinctly professional, with hints of something more suited to a hero university. The room had the usual trappings of a dean's office: a large wooden desk, shelves lined with books, plaques, and framed certificates. However, amidst the standard decor were glass cases displaying old hero memorabilia, a tarnished shield, a gauntlet with scorch marks, and photos of the dean in his prime as the Echo, striking heroic poses with former teammates. A small hollow screen embedded in the wall behind him flickered, showing a live feed of campus activities. Don and Starboy sat on separate chairs, facing the dean from across his imposing desk. Starboy's golden suit was still slightly disheveled from the fight, and Don's calm expression hadn't shifted since they entered. The two boys sat in silence while Dean Sanchez, seated behind his desk, relaxed his stern expression slightly and let out a weary sigh. The dean's eyes settled on Don. "So, you're also in the program?" he asked, rubbing his temple. "The agency failed to alert me of this." Don sat up a little straighter, answering respectfully, "Yes, sir. I joined the program late." The dean nodded absently, looking thoughtful. I see." Inwardly, though, his thoughts wandered. For the agency not to inform us in advance, they probably don't expect us to give him any special treatment. He must be unimportant. But for Starboy, they were very clear a broken bar another sigh escaped him. Turning to face Starboy, the dean's tone grew a little sharper. "That doesn't change the fact that you, Timothy, should know better. Especially since you've been in the program far longer and hold a more defined position. You're his senior, and it's your responsibility to ensure these kinds of far broken bar mistakes don't happen." Starboy gave no indication he was listening, idly wiping the dust from his suit, his expression still one of simmering irritation. Before the dean could continue, a faint buzz echoed from the device on his desk. A feminine voice, his secretary's, came through the speakers. "Dean, there's a Mrs. Dugatti and a Miss Claire here to see their clients." Dean Sanchez's frown deepened slightly. "Mrs. Dugatti? I'm not surprised she's here, but a lawyer too?" he wondered. "Young heroes these days are broken bar, they really are well off." "Times have changed." He composed himself and replied, "Let them in." Forcing a smile as wide as he could manage, he turned to face the door as it clicked open. The first to enter was Miss Claire, gliding into the room with quiet elegance. She wore her usual professional yet vintage attire, a black dress with lace accents, her raven black hair pinned neatly, and her gray eyes sharp yet distant. The dark hues of her outfit contrasted against her pale skin, making her presence both striking and serene. She walked over to Don's side without a word. The second woman to enter was equally beautiful but in a completely different style. Mrs. Dugatti's black suit-like jumpsuit exposed a daring amount of cleavage, with the neckline plunging all the way to her waist, held together by delicate gold accents. Her short blonde hair framed her fair, unblemished face. Rosy cheeks, bold red lipstick, pearl earrings, and a gold necklace completed her look, along with piercing green eyes that immediately commanded the room's attention. She strode confidently over to Starboy, and for the first time since their encounter, Starboy's face changed, his bravado slipping into something much closer to worry. Miss Claire, now standing beside Don, offered him a reassuring nod. Don instinctively began to stand, about to offer her his seat, but before he could fully rise, her soft voice stopped him. "No need," she said, her tone sensual yet professional. "I'm sure the dean here won't keep us long." Dean Sanchez blinked, clearly taken aback by her presence. For a moment, he looked almost starstruck, his eyes lingering on Miss Claire. It wasn't until Mrs. Dugatti cleared her throat that he snapped out of his daze. "Good morning, Dean Sanchez," Mrs. Dugatti greeted with a cool smile. "You seem well." The dean laughed awkwardly. "It's always a pleasure to see you, Mrs. Dugatti," he replied, his forced smile never wavering. "But really, there was no need for you to come. I was just finishing up with the boys here, saying the matter would be resolved if both parties agreed to pay for the damage to school property." "Both?" Mrs. Dugatti's voice turned sharp as her green eyes flicked toward Don. A flash of disgust crossed her face before she quickly looked away, focusing once more on Starboy. "Timothy, stand." Starboy's face drained of any remaining defiance, his posture shifting. "Yes, mother," he muttered, rising to his feet as if he'd been commanded by some invisible force. Like a well-trained dog, he obeyed without hesitation. Don's eyes flicked to Starboy. "Mother?" he thought, but remained silent, though he couldn't help the brief flicker of surprise in his mind. Mrs. Dugatti's expression softened slightly as she turned back to the dean. "What exactly happened here?" The dean tensed up, the forced smile slipping just a little. "God damn it," he thought. "This woman always makes things difficult. If I explain what really happened and make it sound like Starboy was at fault, she'll have my head. He glanced at Starboy, the city's rising star, and then at Don, the boy he assumed wasn't important. Dean Sanchez let out a weary sigh, feeling the weight of the situation. I'm sure your son can explain better than I can, Mrs. Ducati, he said, glancing briefly at Starboy. The two haven't exactly informed me of what happened yet. Mrs. Ducati turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as they locked onto her son. Timothy, what happened? Starboy, clearly uncomfortable, avoided meeting her gaze directly. It was obvious he didn't want to tell the truth, but he couldn't remain silent. We agreed to a little exchange, he said, trying to sound nonchalant as he summarized his own version of the events. But he didn't hold back and caused damage, while I did hold back. Mrs. Ducati didn't even flinch at this, nodding as if it confirmed her expectations. I thought as much, she said, her voice carrying disdain. It's always the untrained riffraff running amok, she added while giving Don a glance in the corner of her eye. Miss Claire's expression darkened slightly, a subtle frown forming on her otherwise calm face. Are you planning on only hearing one side of the story? She asked, her tone cold yet restrained. Dean Sanchez inwardly grumbled, already feeling the situation spiraling out of control. Don't tell me this Miss Claire is going to complicate this. If she clashes with Mrs. Ducati, it won't end well for any of us. He mentally sighed. But better to side with her, just to avoid her wrath. Clearing his throat, the dean began, well, I did hear both booms myself from their exchange. It's clear that Starboy held back, given his level of power, that was the best he could do. As for this chap here, before the dean could finish his sentence, Mrs. Ducati interrupted, her voice sharp and commanding. I think that about proves it enough, she said curtly. So I advise you to have him settle the matter of property damage and consider some disciplinary action. It's the only way these people seem to learn. Dean Sanchez nodded quickly. Of course. That's only natural. Miss Claire's eyes flickered with a cold intensity, and her voice dropped slightly, her words coated with indignation. How dare her? Before she could finish, Don stood up, calmly yet purposefully, cutting off the brewing confrontation. It's fine, Miss Claire, he said, his voice even but firm. I don't mind paying for the damages. He looked directly at the dean and then at Mrs. Ducati, his tone growing sharper. But as for the matter of disciplinary action, I find it unfair that you only intend to punish me, so I'll be withdrawing from the university. The dean blinked in surprise, his expression faltering for the first time. He could understand Don's frustration and quickly tried to smooth things over. That's not necessary, yeah. But Mrs. Ducati wasted no time cutting him off again. Good, she said, her voice oozing satisfaction. If that's how he feels, Dean Sanchez, then allow him to leave. Her tone made it abundantly clear that she was more than pleased with Don's decision. It wasn't about fairness to her, she simply wanted him gone, as if his very presence had somehow offended her. Don stood firm, his expression unreadable, while Miss Claire glanced at him, her composed demeanor never faltering. Are you sure about what you're saying? She asked softly, her voice low and measured. Don nodded. Yes. Trust me. Without missing a beat, Miss Claire turned to the dean, reaching into her purse and pulling out a black business card. Since my client has made his decision, she said, handing the card to Dean Sanchez, you can send the bill for the damages to me. My firm will review it to ensure that you aren't overcharging him. Dean Sanchez accepted the card with a nervous nod. Yes, of course. Have a good day, and before he could finish, Don had already turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps steady. Miss Claire followed a moment later, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she moved with grace. As the doors closed behind them, Don heard Mrs. Ducati's voice, cold and dismissive. Good riddance. Once outside the office, Don and Miss Claire made their way across the hallway and into the elevator at the far end. The doors slid open with a soft ding, and they stepped inside. Don pressed the button for the ground floor, and the doors closed behind them, enclosing them in silence. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Miss Claire stood with her arms crossed, staring ahead, her expression as calm as ever. Without turning to look at him, she finally asked, Is there a reason you prevented me from doing my job in there? Don sighed at Miss Claire's question, running a hand through his hair. It was obvious that wasn't going to be a winning situation for me, he said. The dean was clearly playing favorites, and Mrs. Dugati wasn't going to let me off for whatever reason. But it's also clear that neither of them really knows what happened, so this situation isn't over yet. Miss Claire raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. And what do you mean by that? Don didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone, quickly typing something into the search bar. Don vs. Starboy. Several results popped up instantly, with videos, comments, and clips of the fascia-off spreading across the web like wildfire. Don scrolled through the results until he found a video with clear footage and a good angle of the entire confrontation. He held out the phone to Miss Claire. "What's this?" she asked, taking the phone from him. "Just watch," Don replied. Miss Claire glanced down at the phone, her eyes scanning the screen as the video began to play, showing the events of the fight between Don and Starboy in sharp detail. As the video came to an end, Miss Claire's sharp eyes lingered on the screen for just a moment longer before a small but visible smile curled at the corners of her lips. "Well, aren't you just full of surprises?" she muttered, handing the phone back to Don with an air of approval. Don accepted the phone with a casual nod, and Miss Claire added, "Since this is the case, you're right. I can't imagine the board will be pleased to hear they've lost someone who easily beat their all-so-precious star." She sighed, her tone turning darker. "I only wish you'd told me sooner. I would have loved to see that woman's face fall into utter despair, and ensure that he egotistical son of hers never so much as raises his head in your presence again." Her words were full of bitterness, and Don raised an eyebrow at her tone. "Did you know her before this?" he asked, curious. Miss Claire gave a slight nod, a rare frown touching her otherwise composed features. "Yes, I had the unfortunate pleasure of being her senior at university." She paused, recalling something unpleasant. "Her personality has only gotten more rotten with time, I see. But I digress." She shifted her attention back to Don, her voice softening slightly. "Tell me, dear, why did you choose to hide your strength?" Don had expected this question. Even if the encounter with Starboy hadn't happened, he knew that once his evaluation came to light, Miss Claire would have questioned him. He'd prepared his answer, but he acted as though he was speaking naturally, looking thoughtful for a moment before replying. "Well," he leaned back slightly, as if considering his words. "For one, I didn't awaken the full scope of my powers until a few days ago. My initial plan was to keep it a secret until evaluation day to surprise my family. But I also wanted to experience the dynamic of the school as a normal student. I knew I'd be treated differently once I showed a high evaluation." Miss Claire's expression shifted to one of mild disappointment. "I wouldn't have expected that from you," she said, her voice showing a hint of surprise. "I assumed you'd plan to maximize the gain in reputation by stealing the show at the evaluation. That would ensure many sponsors come knocking with lucrative deals." Don shook his head, a soft chuckle escaping him. "I'm not interested in money." Miss Claire raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Then what are you interested in?" she asked. Don's smile widened slightly as he replied, "I'll tell you once we get better acquainted." Miss Claire smirked. "Cheeky, a broken bar but smart." She then stood, adjusting her coat with a smooth motion. "Why don't you and I go have a late breakfast together? We can discuss your future. I'm sure you realize it won't be the same after today." She glanced at him meaningfully before adding, "We can also use the time to get better acquainted, as you suggested. After all, I have no doubt my role in your life will increase in the coming days, as will your value to my firm." Don thought for a moment, his gaze shifting to the door. "I was expecting her to be more surprised by the video. Maybe even show a bit more eagerness towards me, but I guess that's just a pipe dream. She's too professional and collected. How the hell am I supposed to seduce her?" He sighed inwardly. "Still, this is a start." He gave a nod on the surface. "Sounds like a good idea." Miss Claire's smile deepened, and she said nothing more. Meanwhile, back in Dean Sanchez's office, Starboy now occupied the chair that Don had vacated. He sat with an air of forced indifference, arms crossed, listening half-heartedly as his mother and the dean discussed the situation. Suddenly, The dean's personal phone vibrated in his pocket. The dean glanced at the screen, his expression shifting slightly when he saw the caller ID. His jaw tightened. Dean Sanchez muttered. "It must be important. Please excuse me." He pulled out his phone and stood, walking a few steps away from his desk as he answered the call. "Hello, Chairman." There was a pause, and his expression became slightly confused. "Oh, you are Broken Bar the boy?" The dean glanced briefly toward the Starboy, who now began talking with his mother. "Starboy is right here." Another pause. "Oh, Don Bright, the other kid?" The dean's voice wavered slightly, unsure of the direction the conversation was going. "Don't worry about him, Chairman. I've already sorted the matter." He said he'd pay for the damages and even took the initiative to withdraw from the institution. Suddenly, the muffled sound of shouting came through the phone's speaker. The dean's face stiffened, his eyes widening as he listened. "Chairman, aren't you mistaken?" he stammered. "No, Chairman, I was unaware." "Yes, Chairman, I'll do that right away." The call ended abruptly, leaving the dean standing there, stunned. "Dean, is something the matter?" Before Mrs. Dugatti could finish her sentence, the dean's eyes widened and without a word, he excused himself, before rushing toward the door. He barreled through the hallway, his heavy footsteps thudding against the floor despite his chubby frame, his breath coming in short bursts. "Damn it," he thought. "I've really done it now." Don and Miss Claire sat on the balcony of Circe, an upscale establishment known for its elegant architecture and breathtaking view of the city. The Café Tilde copyright was on the highest floor, offering a panoramic look at the vast metropolis below. Skyscrapers stood tall and proud, their windows gleaming as the sun cast a soft afternoon glow over the city. Further out, smaller buildings dotted the landscape. Beyond them, the horizon stretched endlessly, the faint line where the sky met the distant ocean barely visible. The hum of traffic and the distant chatter of the city's inhabitants felt far removed from the serene atmosphere on the balcony. The circular glass table they sat around was simple but stylish, with a modern design that added to the Café Tilde copyright's refined ambience. Don sat with a mug of coffee in front of him, while Miss Claire held a delicate cup in her slender hands, taking graceful sips. She set her cup down gently on its holder, the soft clink of the porcelain filling the quiet space between them. "Are you fine with just coffee?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Don nodded, holding his mug in one hand. "Yeah, I don't like eating outside of my diet if I can help it." Miss Claire raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "I see, you're very dedicated, it seems." Don smiled. "I try to be." A short silence followed, filled only by the distant sounds of the city. But, in the next moment, Miss Claire's phone vibrated on the table, the screen lighting up with an unknown caller ID. She glanced at it, her face showing no sign of urgency, just mild interest. Her perfectly manicured fingers lifted the phone, and she studied the number for a moment. "Is it still the dean?" Don asked, his tone casual. Miss Claire nodded her head slightly. "I don't pass around my number wantonly, and few people would try to call me as much as this man is trying." Well, it didn't take long for him to find out the truth. She pressed the side button, ignoring the call, and placed her phone back down with a soft tap of disinterest. "There's no point in answering," she said, her voice smooth as ever. "Not until you and I come to a personal understanding as well." Don tilted his head slightly. "Sure. In what regard, though?" Miss Claire leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other with practiced elegance. "That's a good question." She paused, studying him intently before continuing. "Well, to start, you should understand that I'm not the best lawyer someone of your potential could acquire. I'd call myself great at what I do, but definitely not the best, especially when it comes to dealing with popular clients." Don looked at her with curiosity. "You don't represent people who are famous?" Miss Claire nodded, a soft smile appearing on her lips. "I avoid it as much as I can. It's why most of my firm's clientele are well-off but lesser known." Fame can be a double-edged sword, especially when the client is young and more likely to make broken bar mistakes. Don couldn't help but nod in agreement. Her words rang true. "You've got a point. Most lawyers who represent famous people are pretty cutthroat." Miss Claire's eyes sparkled with a hint of amusement. "You think I'm not?" Don chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You definitely look like you are, but not in the sense that you do so without morals." Her smile deepened, her gaze sharp but curious. "Is that what you think? Interesting." She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "What else do I look like?" Don hesitated for a moment. "I don't even know if what I've said so far is right." I can't read her at all. Her heartbeats steady, her breathing calm, and those eyes, they never waver. He shook his head lightly. "I'd rather not make any more assumptions without seeing if the ones I've made are true or false." Suddenly, Miss Claire giggled. The sound was soft and unexpectedly melodic, almost like a cold symphony. It was brief but genuine, and for a moment, Don was caught off guard. If it weren't for what was now becoming his naturally unfazed demeanor, he might have widened his eyes in shock. "She can laugh?" he thought, surprised by the thought. The giggle faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind a delicate smile on Miss Claire's face. She sat back, folding her hands neatly on her lap. "You're quite the amusing young man," she said, her voice returning to its usual calm. "I see now why Sylvia seems so broken but curious about you." Don smiled faintly at the mention of Sylvia, though he didn't comment. Miss Claire's smile lingered as she added, "But we're getting off topic. I'm glad you think highly of me. I won't say I feel the same just yet, but you're beginning to convince me otherwise." Her tone was playful but with a serious undercurrent. "Anyway, if I am to represent you, let me share some of my broken bar work principles." Miss Claire gently placed her cup back on its holder, the soft clink punctuating the pause before she began speaking again. Her fingers traced the edge of the cup idly as she looked across the table at Don, her expression calm but calculating. "If you're to work with me, Don, you should understand the principles by which I operate." She sat up a little straighter, folding her hands neatly in her lap again as if ready to recite a well-rehearsed speech. "First, I don't deal with extremes, no saints and no devils. My clients must be complex, neither purely virtuous nor irredeemably vile. Gray areas are where I thrive." Don nodded slightly but kept his expression neutral, listening intently. "Second, discretion is paramount," she continued. "I don't ask questions that don't need to be asked, and I expect the same from my clients. If I don't know something, it's because I'm not supposed to. And if I do know something, you can trust that I'll never speak of it outside the confines of our work." Her voice was as smooth as the soft breeze that swept through the balcony, but there was a subtle edge to her words, an unspoken warning. Don's gaze didn't waver, still and focused as he absorbed each word. "The third principle," she said, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, "is loyalty. But not blind loyalty. I am loyal to my clients, but that loyalty is earned and can be broken if betrayed. It's a simple exchange here. If you play by the rules, I'll go to the ends of the earth for you. But if you cross me, you'll find my services are suddenly very unavailable." Miss Claire continued, her tone growing slightly cooler. "Fourth, I work with efficiency. I don't waste time, and I don't tolerate indecisiveness. If I take on your case, I expect you to be clear and concise about your goals. There's no room for ambiguity." She leaned back in her chair, her gaze still fixed on him, watching for any sign of discomfort or hesitation. There was none. "The fifth and perhaps most important principle," she said, her voice lowering, "is that I deal in reality, not morality. I'm not concerned with what's right or wrong in the eyes of others, only with what can be done within the law or, if need be, around it." Her smile was small but knowing, as if she had navigated countless situations that most people would shy away from. Don remained still, his face showing no emotion, but he was impressed by her candor. "It's clear she's walked this line many times." "Just what type of people are her clients?" Miss Claire's eyes flickered with curiosity as she studied Don. "Funny," she remarked, "for someone so young, you have a sharp and unmoving gaze after hearing how I conduct my work. Tell me, had you already assumed I operate in such a broken bar ways?" Don smiled softly and shook his head. "No, not at all. I just tend not to be too shocked by what I see or hear after my time in Columbia." He delivered the line smoothly, but inwardly, He knew it was a lie. The truth was, nothing in his past could explain his calm demeanor. It was simply part of who he was now, thanks to a combination of the system and his new double life. It's the best excuse I can give, he thought, mentally noting the lie he'd spun. Miss Claire seemed to accept it without question, nodding in understanding. Sylvia mentioned that, actually, when she first told me Summer had a brother. I'm curious about your time there, but according to my principles, I won't ask. Her grey eyes sparkled with interest, but true to her word, she didn't press for details. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her tone shifting. But for you, specifically, I have one more additional principle. Don raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And that is? It was a little past 1 p.m., and the sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the city. The balcony of the Circe Café copyright had emptied out, leaving Don and Miss Claire as the last patrons. The two sat quietly, their conversation winding down as they both finished their coffee. The glass table between them reflected the light, adding a soft shimmer to the scene. Miss Claire glanced at her elegant wristwatch, her fingers brushing over the delicate band. We should be heading back now, she said smoothly, her eyes flicking up to Don. If you still wish to take part in the evaluation, that is. Or our broken bar. She paused, a thoughtful smile appearing on her lips. Are you perhaps thinking of declaring for another institution? I don't doubt you'll receive many lucrative offers this week if you wait to offers from all over the nation. Don stood up first, pushing his chair back gently as he shook his head. No, he said with certainty. SHU is perfect for me. Miss Claire smiled, clearly satisfied with his decision. She stood as well, her movements as graceful as ever. In that case, I'll begin drafting an agreement between you and the university. Sponsorships and the like can be handled after the evaluation. She paused, adjusting her coat with a flick of her wrist. Do you have any specific demands for the university, or will you trust me to make those on your behalf? Don pretended to think for a moment. Though he'd already considered the terms by which he wanted to operate, he was far from careless when it came to protecting his independence. I don't care about what they have to offer as long as I can have these 7, Don replied, his voice firm but calm. Miss Claire's eyebrow lifted ever so slightly in curiosity. Oh? And what might those 7 be? Don began listing them off, his gaze steady. Non-exclusive affiliation, flexible curriculum, mission autonomy, private funding, intellectual property rights, contract review, and freedom from public relations requirements. Miss Claire's eyes didn't leave his as he spoke, her mind already processing the implications of each demand. She was quick to grasp the strategy behind them. He knows exactly how to ensure his freedom in a place that could otherwise tie him down. She nodded thoughtfully. Let me see if I understand your intentions, she said, her voice smooth and professional, but with a trace of admiration in her tone. Don watched her closely as she began to elaborate. First, non-exclusive affiliation, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly in thought. You want to ensure that your enrollment at SHU doesn't tie you exclusively to their hero management system. This will allow you to operate independently, work with other agencies, or pursue personal missions without needing the university's approval. She gave him a small, knowing smile. Quite clever. It keeps your options open. Don nodded but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Then there's flexible curriculum, she added, crossing her arms lightly. You want a curriculum tailored to your unique skill set and or goals, giving you the freedom to choose which courses or training sessions to attend. That way, you can bypass any mandatory programs that may feel restrictive. She chuckled softly. Very fitting for someone who doesn't like being told what to do, I suppose. Don smirked slightly. She's really quick to catch on. Then again, it is her job. Mission autonomy, Miss Claire went on, her gaze sharpening a little. This allows you to select which missions or situations you participate in, rather than being assigned tasks by the university. You're ensuring that you only take on missions that align with your objectives. I assume you don't want to be dragged into anything that doesn't interest you? Exactly, Don replied simply. Private funding, she continued, her tone becoming a bit more businesslike. You're looking to avoid reliance on the university's equipment or resources by providing your own funding. This will free you from any financial obligations they might impose, and you can use your own tech and equipment. Smart move, especially if you have access to better resources. Don gave a subtle nod of agreement, his expression unfazed. Miss Claire shifted slightly, her gaze still intent. Intellectual property rights, she said, her voice taking on a more serious edge. If you create or innovate any new techniques, technologies, or strategies, you want full ownership of those developments, rather than them becoming university property. She smiled again, a bit more knowingly this time. You don't strike me as the type who would give away your creations without a fight. Not a chance, Don said with a slight grin. And contract review, Miss Claire continued, her head tilted thoughtfully. You want the ability to periodically review your contract or renegotiate terms if the university becomes too restrictive or fails to meet your expectations. It's a safeguard, ensuring you're not locked into something that could hinder your progress. Exactly, Don confirmed. Lastly, freedom from public relations requirements, she said, her voice soft but pointed. You don't want to be involved in university-sponsored media, branding, or PR stunts. This allows you to manage your public image on your own terms, free from their influence. She smiled again, her expression approving. You really do value your independence, don't you? Don chuckled softly and nodded. It's very important to me. Miss Claire looked at him for a moment longer, her eyes filled with curiosity. For someone so young, he's thought all of this through. She smiled and nodded. Very well. I'll ensure these terms are included in the agreement. You've chosen wisely. She checked her watch again, then glanced back at Don. Shall we? Don nodded, and the two of them began walking out of the cafe. Copyright Roughly 15 minutes later, Don and Miss Claire arrived back at SHU, the campus as lively as ever. The noise was almost overwhelming, most of it emanating from the main battle stadium. The massive, open roof structure loomed in the distance, its walls vibrating with the roars of excited fans and students alike. High above the campus, a huge blimp drifted slowly through the sky, displaying a live stream of the evaluation ceremony on a massive screen attached to its side. The images showed the stadium's field below, where candidates tested their powers for all to see. The stadium's field itself was an impressive sight, designed with equipment tailored to test the wide array of abilities SHU students brought to the table. There were large, reinforced platforms for strength tests, dynamic agility courses, and hovering drones equipped with sensors to measure energy output and precision. Massive walls sprang up at intervals, meant for testing speed, scaling abilities, or destructive power. It wasn't just functional, it was meant to be entertaining, with candidates going head-to-head in spectacular fashion, creating a show for both those in the stadium and the millions watching the live stream from the blimp and at home. Miss Claire's Rolls-Royce came to a smooth stop in the student parking lot, the engine purring softly before falling silent. She stepped out first, followed by Don, both of them taking in the lively atmosphere around them. Miss Claire glanced at the bustling campus, her gaze momentarily lingering on the excitement filling the air. It sure does get lively, she commented, her tone lightly amused. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, intending to call Dean Sanchez. But before she could unlock it, her screen lit up with the same number that had already left her over 99 missed calls. Smiling faintly, she glanced at Don. Speak of the devil, she said with a chuckle, gesturing for Don to follow her as they made their way toward the stadium. As they walked, weaving through groups of excited students, Don's own phone began to buzz in his pocket. He glanced down at the screen and smiled when he saw the name. Hey, Mom, Don said as he answered the call. Samantha's voice on the other end was soft, with a hint of concern. Hey, Donnie, is everything alright? Benjamin's been spamming me with messages, asking where you are. He said the ceremony is reaching its closing point. He's also asking if you'd reconsider withdrawing. What's going on? Don smiled as he walked, keeping his tone casual. Don't worry, Mum. I'll fill you in later. But I'm heading to the evaluation right now. Samantha sighed on the other end, her voice slightly muffled as though she was multitasking. She was standing just outside a conference room, glancing over her shoulder when a woman peeked out of the door and said, "Mrs. Bright, the meeting is starting." Samantha turned back to the phone. "Well, all right, honey, I have to go into this meeting, but text me when you're about to do your evaluation. I'll sneak out to watch it. Love you, and all the best." "All right, Mum." "Love you too," Don said before ending the call and sliding his phone back into his pocket. Meanwhile, high above the field in the private viewing room, Dean Sanchez stood nervously in front of the large windows that overlooked the entire stadium. His brow was slick with sweat as he fumbled with his phone, trying once again to reach Miss Claire. The excitement of the event outside seemed to contrast sharply with his anxious mood. Finally, when the call connected, his face lit up with visible relief. "Yes," he thought, holding back the urge to scream in joy as he moved away from the viewing window while trying to sound calm. "Yes, hello Miss Claire." Broken bar. Down on the field, the stadium was packed with spectators, all buzzing with excitement as the batch of promising students entered for their evaluations. Fans waved banners, and the deafening cheers echoed through the stadium, creating an almost feverish energy. The candidates lined up, each eager to showcase their abilities. Up in the commentator's booth, two announcers were broadcasting the event live to viewers across the country. One of them, a man with slicked back hair and a confident tone, was midway through his analysis of the current batch of students. "And here we have another promising group of candidates from our City Elite Hero program," he said, his voice ringing with excitement. Of course, all eyes were supposed to be on Starboy today, but things have shifted in a rather unexpected way since here. Before he could finish, a man wearing an earpiece rushed up to the booth and leaned down to whisper something urgent into his ear. The commentator's face tensed momentarily before he cleared his throat and quickly adjusted his posture. "Anyway," he continued, regaining his composure, moving on to the introductions. A broken bar. His co-host, a woman with short cropped hair and a more relaxed tone, chuckled slightly. "You know, there's always some unexpected drama during these events, but this year is something else entirely." Below them, the students took their places on the field, with each one stepping forward as their names were announced. The crowd responded with a mix of cheers and murmurs, sizing up each candidate as they walked toward the evaluation equipment. "All right, folks, buckle up," the first commentator began, his voice booming. "We've got a real lineup of talent coming up next. Leading the charge is Thunderclap, son of the legendary Thunderstrike. This guy is all about power." The camera zoomed in on Thunderclap as he strode confidently across the field, his muscular frame exuding brute strength. His dark blue suit was sleeveless, showing off his thick, powerful arms, and a thunderbolt symbol stretched across his chest. His short, spiky black hair gave him a fierce look, and his intense eyes gleamed with pride as he raised his hand to the crowd. "Thunderclap has an A grade in strength, folks," the second commentator chimed in, her voice filled with admiration. "That's no joke, and those B-grade sonic shockwaves of his? He's capable of generating concussive blasts with just a clap." "Exactly," the first commentator agreed with a laugh. "He's like a walking earthquake." "Don't forget, this kid stopped that bridge collapse last year with those very shockwaves. Stabilized the whole structure. Not to mention his involvement in taking down villain gangs alongside his father. A true powerhouse." The crowd cheered as Thunderclap reached his position, his large hands casually flexing as he prepared for his evaluation. The camera then panned to the next student, Silverwing, as he gracefully entered the field. Silverwing was lean and athletic, his tight silver and blue suit fitting him like a second skin, designed for maximum aerodynamics. His long silver hair flowed behind him as he walked, and his bright blue eyes sparkled with confidence. The silver wings that sprouted from his back shimmered in the sunlight, a perfect blend of aesthetics and function. "Ah, here comes Silverwing," the second commentator said, his voice full of excitement. "Son of the Silver Guardian." Known for his speed in flight. An A grade in flight and B grade speed, The first commentator added, "He's the definition of precision in the air. Remember that time he intercepted the terrorist bomb midair? He took it out of the city and detonated it safely. Unbelievable aerial skills." The crowd responded with a wave of applause as Silverwing gave a cool nod and positioned himself, wings flexing slightly as if ready to take off at any moment. Next, the camera focused on Phantom Strike as he made his entrance. Unlike the others, Phantom Strike moved like a shadow, his dark costume blending into the shadows around him. His hood was pulled low over his face, but his piercing gray eyes were visible, scanning the field with calculated precision. His black and dark gray armor clung to his slender, agile frame, and the dark tendrils of his cape shifted with each step, adding to his mysterious aura. "And there's Phantom Strike," the first commentator noted. "Son of the Night Phantom. You might not even see him coming, folks. With B-grade stealth and agility, this guy's all about strategy and silence." "That's right," the second commentator agreed. "He's the guy who operates in the shadows. And don't underestimate him just because he's quieter. He's got short-range energy projection up his sleeve too, and with his C-grade in that, he can strike when you least expect it." The crowd watched in awe as Phantom Strike almost seemed to vanish into the shadows of the stadium, his dark figure blending in until he reappeared near his position. The air grew noticeably colder as the next student, Frostbite, made her way onto the field. Her icy blue suit hugged her athletic figure, and the intricate frost patterns across her arms and legs seemed to shimmer like they were alive. Her white hair, cut short in a bob, contrasted sharply with her fair skin, and her piercing blue eyes gave her an almost otherworldly look. A subtle mist of cold air followed her every step, and her breath came out in visible puffs as the temperature around her dropped. "Now here's a real showstopper of Frostbite," the first commentator exclaimed, his voice rising. "She's been making waves, and not just because of her frosty powers." The camera zoomed in on her face as she approached the field, her expression calm and composed. "Daughter of notorious supervillains, but don't let that fool you," the second commentator added quickly. "This girl's got an A-grade in frost manipulation. She can freeze just about anything, and with B-grade ice armor and cryokinesis speed, she's as fast as she is durable. And let's not forget the time she stopped that bank heist by freezing the getaway cars," the first commentator said. "She had the whole thing wrapped up before the cops even showed up." Frostbite reached her position and crossed her arms, her icy presence enough to keep the crowd's attention as they marveled at her control over her powers. The excitement in the stadium built up to a fever pitch as the last student stepped forward, hovering just slightly above the ground. The golden shimmer of his suit caught the sunlight, creating a radiant glow around him as he floated toward the center of the field. His suit was form-fitting, adorned with a large star emblem on his chest, a clear nod to his father's legacy. His blonde hair, styled perfectly, glistened in the light, and his confident smile never wavered as he waved to the crowd. "And now, the one you've all been waiting for, a Starboy," the first commentator nearly shouted, barely able to contain his excitement. "Son of Starman, one of the most iconic heroes in history," the second commentator added. "With a B-grade in strength, durability, and speed, although his durability jumps to at night, and don't forget, he's got flight. The complete package." Starboy landed softly on the field, his cape fluttering dramatically behind him as he took his place, the crowd's cheers reaching a deafening level. His blue eyes scanned the stadium, his smile widening as he basked in the adoration. "Let's not forget his track record," the first commentator continued. "Starboy's already been involved in high-profile missions, including last year's villain breakout and his heroic skyscraper rescue that earned him his hero license at just 16. Talk about following in your father's footsteps." As Starboy waved to the crowd, the camera zoomed in on his face, catching every bit of the pride that radiated from him. The energy in the stadium was almost tangible, with fans chanting his name, eager to see what he would do next. But just as the commentators prepared to continue, a man wearing an earpiece rushed up to the booth again and whispered something into one of the commentators' ears. The commentator's face momentarily stiffened as he listened, then he quickly cleared his throat and straightened in his seat. "Anyway," he said, brushing off the moment of hesitation. It seems we have a late surprise entry folks. A broken bar. Don and Miss Claire stood near the VIP entrance, where an usher had directed them at Dean Sanchez's instruction. The area was quieter compared to the main stadium, but the muffled roar of the crowd could still be heard in the background. The large doors behind them gleamed, with modern architecture marking the exclusive section of the stadium. Moments later, Dean Sanchez appeared, walking down a red carpet flanked by 2 bodyguards. The bodyguards were large, muscular men dressed in black suits with dark sunglasses. Their rigid postures made them look more like statues than humans, moving only to keep pace with the Dean. Despite his attempts to appear composed, it was obvious Dean Sanchez was rushing. His steps quickened as he approached Don and Miss Claire, his forced smile a little too wide. "Miss Claire, Don," Dean Sanchez greeted them, trying to sound pleasant, though there was an edge of nervousness in his voice. "I'm so pleased you're here. First of all, allow me to apologize for." Before he could finish, Miss Claire cut him off, her voice smooth but dismissive. "Spare us the sophistry," she said, waving a hand in front of her as if brushing away something unimportant. "We're here to do business, not listen to fake apologies." Dean Sanchez blinked, clearly taken aback by her bluntness. He stuttered for a moment. Well, heartbroken bar I see," he mumbled, forcing an awkward smile as he nodded. Of course." Miss Claire barely gave him another glance, instead turning her attention to Don. "My client also needs to join the evaluation," she said, her tone firm. "We can talk properly afterward." "Unless you're not interested at all?" Dean Sanchez's face tightened, his thoughts a mess. "If I let him take part in the evaluation without declaring for SHU, he could just choose this to boost his image and leave for another university. But if I turn him away now, the chairman will have my head." "Damn it, this is all that woman's fault. I hope she gets cancer." On the surface, Dean Sanchez forced another smile and nodded his head multiple times. Of course," he said quickly, gesturing to one of the guards. "You there, what are you waiting for?" "Lead Mr. Bright to the changing room." The guard, momentarily confused, nodded swiftly. "Of course, sir," he replied before turning to Don. "This way, sir." Don nodded but held up a hand. "One moment." He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Samantha, letting her know he'd be on soon. He then handed the phone over to Miss Claire. "Could you keep this for me?" he asked. Miss Claire accepted the phone with a nod. "Not a problem," she said, before adding, "All the best out there." Dean Sanchez, eager to move things along, gestured toward Miss Claire. "This way, Miss Claire. I've already had someone prepare a seat for you in the viewing room. Will you be wanting?" His voice trailed off as they walked, his attempts to make small talk sounding awkward and forced. Don shook his head at the sight, thinking, he's really desperate to keep things smooth. Turning to the guard, Don said, "Lead the way." Meanwhile, at Samantha's workplace, she sat in the conference room surrounded by her colleagues. The room was modern and sleek, with glass walls that allowed a view of the bustling office outside. A man at the front of the room was presenting a detailed report, his voice steady as he went over projections and data points. Samantha listened carefully, but her focus was interrupted when her phone buzzed loudly against the wooden table. The vibration sounded harsh in the otherwise quiet room. She subtly reached for her phone, lifting it off the table to glance at the screen. It was a message from Don. He must be about to go on, she thought, a small smile forming on her lips as she read the text. However, the moment she looked down at her phone, one of the women sitting around the conference table narrowed her eyes. The woman's neat black hair was tied in a tight bun, and her sharp, angular features made her frown look even more severe. She wore a tailored navy blue suit, and her arms were crossed in front of her. "Is something the matter, Samantha?" the woman asked coldly. The man at the front stopped speaking, and everyone's eyes turned toward Samantha. She frowned slightly, feeling the pressure of the room's attention. "Sorry," Samantha cleared her throat. "It's a message from my son." And before she could finish explaining, the same woman cut in, her tone condescending. "It doesn't matter. This is an important meeting." But before the woman could finish speaking herself, The man seated at the head of the table spoke up. He was an older man, with salt and pepper hair neatly combed back and kind, but firm, eyes behind a pair of glasses. His well-fitted suit showed a sense of authority, and the way he carried himself made it clear he was used to being in charge. "That's enough, Isabella," he said calmly but with a clear edge to his words. "What if it's something important?" Samantha clearly has something on her mind, and as her colleagues, it's insensitive to just assume otherwise. "Don't you think?" Isabella's face tightened, a deep frown crossing her sharp features. She glanced at the man, then nodded stiffly. "Of course, Mr. Thompson," she said through clenched teeth. Mr. Thompson nodded at Samantha, his calm demeanor encouraging her to continue. "Go on, Samantha." "What were you saying?" Samantha smiled professionally. "Thank you, sir," she said, clearing her throat before addressing the room. "My son is doing his evaluation at SHU today, and he was just telling me that he's about to go on." As Samantha spoke, Isabella narrowed her eyes in clear suspicion but remained silent until Samantha had finished. Then, with a smirk, she leaned forward slightly. "You couldn't come up with a better excuse, Samantha." Isabella's voice was sharp and full of disbelief. "I have a nephew who goes to SHU, so I know today they're only evaluating students in the city's elite hero program. You expect me to believe your son is among them?" "Please." The room grew tense. Mr. Thompson didn't immediately say anything but looked thoughtfully at Samantha, as if weighing Isabella's words. A few people around the conference table exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement with Isabella. One of the men said, "That's true. Only the elite hero program students are being evaluated today." Others, however, voiced a different opinion. "Maybe her son is in the program." "Who are you to dismiss her without proof?" one person countered. Another shook his head. "Oh, please. If just anyone could join that program, my son would be in it too." Samantha's frown deepened, but she remained composed. "My son just isn't anyone," she said firmly, her voice calm but resolute. "If you don't believe me, that's fine. But please don't insult me by calling me a liar." Her words cut through the murmurs in the room, and the tension grew as everyone turned their eyes back to Mr. Thompson, awaiting his response. Samantha, feeling the growing discomfort, turned to him directly. "Sir," she began, "may I step out to stream my son's evaluation?" Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he considered the request. "I've never seen Samantha this passionate about something," he thought to himself. "She's not a liar, I'm sure of that. But this might be a good opportunity to win her over." "She doesn't make that easy." After a brief moment, he maintained his gentle smile and stood up, gesturing for the room to calm down. "All right, that's enough," he said, his voice authoritative but relaxed. "We've already covered the main points of the meeting. Why not take a little break and watch the evaluation?" He smiled. "I'd also like to see what our city has to offer this year. After all, don't forget, we're a partial sponsor of SHU." Isabella, visibly irritated, narrowed her eyes further. "Sir, I don't think it's appropriate to." But before she could finish, several men around the table nodded in agreement with Mr. Thompson, clearly curious about the evaluation. Isabella clicked her tongue in frustration, crossing her arms as she glared at the table. Mr. Thompson nodded toward the man operating the projector. "Can you set up the stream?" The man hesitated. One moment, sir," he said, quickly typing on his laptop and searching for the live broadcast. After a few clicks, he turned back. "I've found the stream, but it's charging 2.99 credits. Mr. Thompson waved his hand dismissively. "Pay it." The man grumbled under his breath but complied, entering the payment details. A few seconds later, the stream appeared on the large presentation screen, showing a wide view of the stadium. The camera panned around, capturing the field and the crowd in the stands. The vibrant energy of the event was evident, even through the screen. Isabella raised an eyebrow, her tone irritated as she asked, "So, where's your son?" Before Samantha could answer, the commentators' voices filled the room. "Apologies for the delay, folks," the first commentator said, his voice lively and full of anticipation. "We've just gotten word that a late entry will be coming out soon. If you've been keeping an eye on social media, you probably already know him." Samantha leaned forward slightly, her eyes glued to the screen as she listened intently. "We don't have any official details on his powers," the second commentator continued, "but rumors say his fist packs a mean punch." "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Santos City's very own Central Mall hero, Doon Bright." The camera zoomed in as Don emerged onto the field, casually waving at the crowd. He wore the standard training suit that all students wore during physical courses, an no-frills black uniform designed for flexibility and practicality. Compared to the flashy costumes of the other candidates, Don's appearance was remarkably ordinary. No dazzling features, no vibrant colors, no signature emblems. His short black hair and calm demeanor made him look like any regular student. In the conference room, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The people who had been skeptical now looked confused, exchanging glances, as if trying to reconcile Samantha's earlier claim with the ordinary-looking boy on the screen. A few of them muttered quietly, their expressions ranging from curious to envious. "Well, that's her son, all right," one of the men said, raising an eyebrow. "Samantha Bright, right?" "It's the same name," another person muttered. "He looks pretty normal, doesn't he?" Despite the murmurs around her, Samantha's focus never wavered. Her eyes were glued to the screen, and a warm, proud smile spread across her face as she watched Don make his way onto the field. As the camera zoomed in on Don, the crowd in the stadium cheered, though the volume wasn't as deafening as it had been for the earlier students. Still, Don's presence seemed to create a sense of anticipation among those watching, especially those who had followed his previous actions on social media. Dean Sanchez led Miss Claire through the grand entrance of the private viewing room. The air in this exclusive space was different from the bustling stadium outside. There was a quiet hum of important conversations, mixed with the soft clinking of glasses and the occasional rustle of expensive fabrics. The room was filled with polished, well-dressed individuals, most of them representing agencies, tech companies, or sponsors looking to back the next generation of heroes. Along with them were a few prominent alumni. Some of SHU's most accomplished heroes are sitting in comfortable, plush chairs as they watch the candidates below with sharp, discerning eyes. The seating area that Dean Sanchez had arranged for Miss Claire was a cut above the rest. It was positioned near the wide, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the stadium, offering a perfect view of the field. The luxurious leather chairs were spaced comfortably apart, designed for privacy, and a small, polished wooden table sat between each set of chairs, adorned with crystal glasses and a bottle of sparkling water. The ambient lighting was soft, casting a warm glow that highlighted the elegance of the room without distracting from the main event outside. As Miss Claire followed the dean, her eyes moved discreetly around the room, recognizing several familiar faces. A few top executives from national hero agencies were deep in conversation, their eyes occasionally flicking to the stadium below. Nearby, she spotted two heroes with long-standing ties to SHU, both of them alumni now scouting for potential sidekicks. She mentally noted the fierce expressions on their faces, thinking to herself, "It's a room full of wolves, each waiting for the right moment to pounce." Her gaze shifted, landing on Mrs. Dugarty, a senior agent from the largest sponsor of SHU and of course Starboy's mother. She was actively watching the field with a shocked expression as Don made his entrance onto the stadium floor. A small smile tugged at Miss Claire's lips. She allowed herself a brief moment of amusement before thinking, "I should fit right in." Dean Sanchez, clearly eager to please, pulled out the chair for her as she sat down, smoothing out her coat. He took the seat next to her, still perspiring slightly from the earlier rush. "So, Miss Claire," Sanchez began in a voice he tried to keep light, "how did you end up becoming the young man's lawyer? You must have a good eye for talent, huh?" Before he could finish, Miss Claire raised a single finger to her lips and shot him a sharp look. "Quiet," she said softly, her voice cool but firm. "I'm trying to watch my client make his entrance." Dean Sanchez immediately shut his mouth, nodding awkwardly as he shifted in his seat, trying to regain his composure. Down on the field, the atmosphere was alive with excitement, though not without some confusion. The massive crowd roared, their energy swelling as they reacted to the unexpected addition. While some fans were simply thrilled to see anyone new, Others were scratching their heads, trying to figure out who Don was. If anyone were to check the activity on the live stream comment sections, they'd understand just how divided the reaction was. Delaygram. Bye bye Starboy. If Starboy gets rocked again, I'm convinced he's just out here training for the NASA. Hero Hunter 23. Starboy better hope he brought his pride back with him, cause he left it smeared across the pavement the last time. Thy negation. Ride or die Star fan. He's got this. You're all just haters. Starboy's gonna show everyone up this time for real. Savage reply. Ride or die Star fan. He already showed up. Problem is, he left half his dignity behind when Don sent him flying. Trip Starboy fans. Starboy stands still out here praying for a miracle like their boy didn't just become a human projectile last time. Fanboy gone. Round 2? More like round 0, please not again. Starboy is about to collect L's like it's a full-time job. Viral fails. Is Starboy even conscious after that first punch? You all see him shaking? Someone bring him a chair before he collapses again. Mask book. Slay Queen 500. Starboy's fans got to be sweating more than he is right now. If he messes this up again, they're gonna have to pack up their fan pages. Cancelled. @savagely_me. Someone better tell Starboy lightning doesn't strike twice, but apparently Don's fists do. Yen. Starboy is about to show everyone that was just a fluke. He's ready now. Let's go. Superscript A. It hurts to be Starboy fan. This is painful. Bro's still dusting off his golden jumpsuit and you're all expecting a comeback. The only thing coming back is the memes. Clown Central. Starboy stands acting like he didn't just eat pavement 10 minutes ago. He's ready. Yeah, ready to retire. Chirper, X, Ultimate Sass Lord. Starboy is out here like, I won't make the same mistake twice, but bro's knees are still shaking from the first one. He gone. Zero Chill 69, the real punchline here is Starboy thinking he's actually ready now. Dude, you're one more hit away from a Netflix documentary. LOLIRO_100, imagine thinking Starboy is gonna bounce back when he's still picking dust out of his hair from round 1. Section 1/4 diaresis. Starboy support team. Wait till you see his real power. He's about to flex on Don. Zero Filter 99, Starboy support team. He flexed last time and all we saw were his bones getting real close to the sidewalk. Shade Throw irks. I bet Starboy is thinking I'll show them, but he's looking more like he's about to show us how to get knocked out twice in one day. Currency inverted exclamation mark. Back on the field, Don walked calmly toward the group of candidates, his expression composed and unaffected by the attention. The other candidates, already lined up for their evaluations, exchanged confused glances. Clearly puzzled by his sudden appearance, the only one who didn't seem confused was Starboy. His blue eyes were locked onto Don with an intense, angry glare, his jaw clenched tight. The muscles in his neck tensed as he ground his teeth. Clearly frustrated. His hands balled into fists at his sides, though he tried to maintain his composure for the cameras. Silverwing, standing next to Starboy, glanced at him and smirked. I wonder who that is, he said in a low voice, his tone full of sarcasm. He then cast a sideways glance at Starboy, his smile widening slightly. Maybe he's here to finish what he started. A broken bar taking your spotlight. Starboy's teeth clenched even harder. Shut up if you know what's good for you, he hissed, his voice low and threatening. Silverwing just chuckled softly, unfazed and enjoying the moment. As Don arrived and took his place next to the other candidates, most of them gave him curious glances, unsure what to make of the situation. But Starboy's stare remained filled with disdain, his hostility toward Don practically radiating from him. Don, however, didn't acknowledge the tension. He simply stood there, relaxed, his hands at his sides, waiting for the evaluation to begin. Up in the commentator's booth, the energy was starting to build again. The main commentator, still recovering from the surprise of the late entry, cleared his throat before speaking. And now that everyone has arrived, let me introduce the host of this year's evaluation. His voice boomed, barely hiding his excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to the man behind some of the most cutting-edge hero tech in the world, SHU's very own Dr. Gadget." As Dr. Gadget hovered above the field on a circular platform, the anticipation in the air seemed to grow thicker. The platform itself was simple but elegant, made of shining metallic panels, with a faint blue glow radiating from its underside as it hovered effortlessly in the air. Dr. Gadget's posture was slightly hunched, his medium-length gray hair sticking out in unruly directions as if he'd spent more time in his lab than in front of a mirror. His gray mustache curled over his upper lip, and the visor across his eyes gave him a sharp, analytical look. In one hand, he grasped a metallic cane, tapping it lightly behind his back as he observed the field below. He didn't waste any time with pleasantries as a small microphone hovered toward him. Dr. Gadget then spoke, his voice booming through the stadium speakers with a gruff but thoughtful tone. "Welcome, new students, teachers, supporters, parents, members of staff, and special guests alike to the 60th Annual SHU Evaluation Week." The crowd erupted into applause and cheers, the energy in the stadium growing as Dr. Gadget stood tall on his platform, eyes scanning the sea of faces in the stands. Below, Don looked up, taking note of the figure above them, absorbing every detail. "So this is the guy who made Winter," Don thought, his eyes narrowing slightly. "He definitely looks like a stereotypical mad genius." Dr. Gadget cleared his throat before continuing, the microphone hovering close to his lips. "I've been in charge of designing the equipment for this event for over 50 years. I remember during my own evaluation on these very same grounds," he said with a small chuckle, "that I had only scored a D." He laughed softly, a sound that rumbled low through the speakers. "Yet, look where I am today." The crowd laughed with him, though the amusement quickly gave way to the heavy weight of his words. "Do not take evaluations to heart," he said, his voice lowering slightly, becoming more thoughtful. "It takes far more to be a hero." His gaze shifted down to the candidates standing on the field, and for a moment, his expression hardened. His visor reflected the lights of the stadium, making it hard to tell where exactly he was looking. "And for those of you lucky and blessed enough to have extraordinary talents and support, I urge you not to become complacent. Over the years, I've seen many stars fall short of their true potential." Don's eyes remained fixed on the man, listening carefully as Dr. Gadget spoke. "He's not wrong," Don thought. "Even the best of the best can crash and burn." Dr. Gadget's grip on his cane tightened as he opened his hands, gesturing toward the stadium and the students below. "Work hard, perfect your crafts for the good of humanity. For Theta Broken Bar is what it means to be a superhero." The crowd burst into cheers and applause once more, their excitement building with each passing moment. The candidates on the field exchanged glances. Don remained still, his eyes shifting slightly to take in his fellow students, watching their reactions carefully, but all remained calm. Dr. Gadget smiled faintly and opened his arms wider. "Now then," he said, his voice booming again, "may the evaluations of Broken Bar begin." As if on cue, the stadium suddenly lit up, and with a low whir, the entire field was encased in a shimmering, translucent force field. The dome-like structure formed quickly, rising high above the candidates and cutting them off from the rest of the stadium, save for the hovering platform on which Dr. Gadget stood. The crowd watched in awe, the lights reflecting off the surface of the dome. Inside the dome, Dr. Gadget floated down to stand on the ground alongside the candidates. His cane made a soft clink as it touched the floor, his expression now one of focus. "The first to be evaluated," he announced, turning slightly, "is Thunderclap." The crowd roared in approval as Thunderclap stepped forward, his bulky figure drawing immediate attention. His deep blue sleeveless suit gleamed under the lights, and his powerful arms flexed as he stretched them out, preparing for his evaluation. His face was stern, his jaw set as he gave a confident nod to the watching crowd. Thunderclap took his position at the center of the field, standing on one of the reinforced platforms designed to measure strength and energy output. The large, metallic circle beneath his feet hummed softly, adjusting to his weight as he readied himself for the test. He rolled his shoulders back, his eyes narrowing in focus. Dr. Gadget stepped to the side, his cane tapping lightly against the platform as he moved. "Remember, he said, his voice firm. This isn't just about raw power. Show us control, precision. That's what makes a true hero. Sure. Thunderclap didn't seem fazed. He raised his hands, his fingers flexing as he prepared to unleash his power. The crowd fell silent, all eagerly waiting. Thunderclap's hands came together in a deafening clap, and the air around him vibrated violently. A shockwave of pure energy burst from his hands, rippling outward in a concussive blast. The force of the shockwave was so powerful that it sent small gusts of wind through the stadium, even as the dome held firm. The sensors embedded in the platform immediately began to register the magnitude of the energy output, their displays flickering as the data poured in. Thunderclap, his face focused, sent out another clap, this one even more controlled, as the shockwave rippled through the air in a tighter, more precise blast. The crowd erupted into cheers, and the commentators could be heard shouting over the noise. And there it is, folks. One of the commentators yelled, Thunderclap's signature move is sonic shockwaves capable of stabilizing collapsing structures or knocking back entire enemy squads. On the field, Thunderclap lowered his hands, breathing heavily but clearly pleased with his performance. The platform beneath him flickered with readings, but Dr. Gadget, standing nearby, remained impassive, his visor scanning the data. Don watched closely, noting the impressive force behind Thunderclap's power, but also recognizing something in his stance. He's strong, no doubt, Don thought, crossing his arms casually. But he's relying on brute force more than precision. As Thunderclap stepped back from the platform, the crowd's applause still echoing in the air, Dr. Gadget raised a hand. Well done, he said, his tone even. A solid display of power. But remember, control is key. You don't always need to shake the world to make an impact. Thunderclap gave a respectful nod, though his face showed a hint of frustration. He stepped back into line with the other candidates, his broad shoulders still tense. As the stadium began to quiet down, Don glanced at the next candidate. Dr. Gadget, standing in his usual hunched posture, tapped his cane lightly on the ground. His visor flickered slightly before his gruff voice echoed through the stadium once more. The next to be evaluated, Silverwing. As soon as his name was called, Silverwing's face lit up with a smile, his perfect teeth catching the light. He stepped away from the line of candidates, his silver and blue suit also gleaming under the stadium lights as he waved toward the crowd. His movements were smooth and eye-catching, each wave drawing more cheers from his adoring fans. In terms of flashiness and charisma, Silverwing was in a league of his own, being both a talented young hero and a proper celebrity. He moved with the grace of someone who was used to the attention, used to being in the spotlight. Crowd cheers loudly. Silverwing spread his wings wide, the metallic feathers glistening in the sunlight. With a powerful leap, he launched himself into the air, his wings beating once before they caught the wind, sending him soaring upward effortlessly. The crowd gasped in admiration as he twisted mid-air, his body spinning with both precision and speed. And here he goes, folks. One of the commentators exclaimed, his excitement barely contained. Silverwing, son of the Silver Guardian, showing off his legendary flight capabilities. Look at that agility. The second commentator chimed in, her voice equally thrilled. He's an A-grade flyer for a reason, folks. Precision, speed, and control all wrapped into one package. Just look at him go. Silverwing's wings cut through the air with smooth efficiency, his body darting between the tall pillars and obstacles that had been set up around the stadium for his evaluation. He moved with the efficiency of a falcon, each twist and turn calculated to maximize his agility. As he zipped through a narrow space between two towering platforms, he folded his wings in tightly, spinning through the gap with incredible speed before snapping them open again to continue his flight. Swoosh! His wings cut through the air again as he dipped low, almost brushing the ground, before rocketing back into the sky, leaving trails of silver light in his wake. The fans were loving every moment of it. Silverwing's eyes gleamed as he glanced back at the crowd, knowing exactly how to work the audience. He performed a series of flips and rolls, showing off his acrobatic skill in the air. The crowd responded with a deafening cheer, but from the sidelines, Dr. Gadget, Don, and the other candidates watched with calm, unreadable expressions. Dr. Gadget stood with his arms crossed, his visor flickering as it tracked Silverwing's movements. He gave a small nod but remained largely unimpressed, his sharp eyes focusing on the precision of each maneuver rather than the flashiness of the display. Don, for his part, stood with his hands loosely at his sides, watching Silverwing's evaluation with mild interest. Impressive skill, he thought, his eyes narrowing slightly as Silverwing executed yet another complex aerial twist. But it feels more like a performance than anything else. Starboy, meanwhile, wasn't even bothering to watch his rival's performance. He stood with his arms crossed tightly, occasionally glancing in Don's direction from the corner of his eye, his jaw clenched. The anger that radiated from him was noticeable to anyone nearby, but Don chose to ignore the glares, refusing to give Starboy any satisfaction. Instead, his attention shifted briefly to Frostbite, who stood a few feet away, her icy blue eyes watching the evaluation with a calm, almost detached expression. "Let's not stare too long," Don reminded himself with a mental smirk. "I'm on television right now." Silverwing, oblivious to the lack of enthusiasm from his fellow candidates, was finishing up his display with a grand finale. He flew up high, and then, with a sudden burst of speed, he dove straight down toward the ground. Just when it seemed like he might crash, he folded his wings back tightly against his body and spun into a dizzying corkscrew, cutting through the air with a high-pitched whoosh that echoed across the stadium. At the very last second, he spread his wings wide, stopping his descent just inches from the ground, before landing softly and gracefully on the platform. Crowd explodes in cheers and applause. The stadium went wild, fans leaping to their feet as they clapped and cheered. The commentators were equally excited, their voices booming through the speakers. "Incredible!" the first commentator shouted. "What a finish!" Silverwing with one of the cleanest, most precise aerial maneuvers we've ever seen during an evaluation. The second commentator quickly added, that corkscrew dive was nothing short of breathtaking. "His control over his flight is flawless. This kid is a natural." Meanwhile, in the live stream chatrooms, fans of Silverwing were just as enthusiastic. Also this led to clashes with fans of Starboy. Delaygram. At Star Oil, Silverwing's out here flapping like a pigeon in the park. Meanwhile, Starboy could actually hold his own in a fight. At Silversaws. At Star Oil hold his own? Bruh, your boy got knocked into next week. At least Silverwing's not auditioning for Planet Earth iOS. At Neutral Observer 21. At Star Oil at Silversaws neither of them are holding their own when they're both one gust of wind away from a wardrobe malfunction. At Flying High Silver, at least my boy Silverwing doesn't need his hair brushed after every punch. Starboy. Not so much the At Star Power 99. At Flying High Silver yeah, but can Silverwing even fight, or does he just hover like a drone? He's all flash, no smash as inverted exclamation mark. At Neutral _thoughts, at Star Power 99 flash, smash? More like who wore its shiny array. They both look like rejected action figures from the bargain bin. At Silver Surge, look at that precision. Silverwing glides like he's on air. Starboy probably needs a GPS just to find his way back after that punch. Negation Diaresis Sedilla. At Starboy Fanatic 69. At Silver Surge at least Starboy tries to fight, not just dance in the air like a ballroom dancer. He's a hero, not a Cirque du Soleil audition. Superscript A. At Sarcasm Overload, meanwhile, I'm just here wondering if their suits came with extra glitter packs, because boy, they're sparkling. Diaresis. At Silver Wings for Life, you see that landing? Graceful. Starboy fans could never relate. Their boy lands like a sack of potatoes. At Starbright Superfan. At Silver Wings for Life. Graceful? More like useless. Starboy's at least out here actually punching, not fluttering around like Tinkerbell. Sections are ATMI Diaresis Sedilla. At Mr. Neutral 12, can't tell if this is an evaluation or a fashion show. Either way, both of them are overdressed for a fight. Negation. At Silver wins every time. Silverwing, flawless flight. Starboy, flawless flop. Need I say more? FY currency middle. AATM Idiaresis Sedilla at star superior 69. At Silver wins every time. Silverwing's just showing off cues. He knows if he actually fought, it'd be game over. We're here for heroes, not acrobats. FY yen apostrophe. At neutral fan 69. At Silver wins every time. Let's be real, both of them would lose to a stiff breeze if we weren't paying for this circus. FY currency inverted exclamation mark. At wing it's Silver. Silverwing's flying like a pro while Starboy's still picking dust out of his hair from earlier. Who's the real star here? Thioe. At ride or die for Starboy. At wing it's Silver. Flying's cute until someone hits you. Then what? Starboy wouldn't waste time doing loop-de-loops in the sky. FY currency inverted exclamation mark. At Silver streaked. Silverwing's suit is shining brighter than Starboy's career right now. Dude, out here looking like a walking Elthio. At Starfight Turks, all that sparkle for Silverwing and still zero punches thrown. Is he trying to blind us with his wings? Thy Pilcro Idiaresis. At Objective Viewer 2024, at Silver streaked. At Starfight Turks, they both look like they bought their costumes from a superhero clearance rack. No offense. Thy. At Winged Wonder 84, Silverwing doesn't even need to fight to win. Starboy's already lost. Twice. At least my guy's perfect. Thy Idiaresis. At Star Powered for Life, yeah, he's perfect. If you're looking for someone to perform at your next birthday party, Starboy would actually get the job done. Thighs. At Still Not Impressed, both of you all need to chill. No one's perfect when they're dressed like disco balls. FY inverted question mark. As the applause finally began to die down, Silverwing walked back to the line of candidates, his head held high. His wings folded neatly against his back as he approached Starboy with a confident smile playing on his lips. Without missing a beat, he glanced at Starboy and said, "Try to beat that, Timothy." Starboy's face twitched with barely contained rage, but before he could respond, Silverwing turned his gaze to Don. His smile didn't falter, but this time, he said nothing. Instead, he simply glanced at Don with an almost calculating look in his eyes. Don met Silverwing's gaze without reacting, his face remaining neutral. Great, Don thought, watching as Silverwing rejoined the lineup. There's two of them. He could already sense that Silverwing was different from Starboy. While Starboy was driven by arrogance and pride, Silverwing was far more subtle. This one's less arrogant and more cunning. Definitely the one to keep an eye on. And if we're talking pure skill, he's got me beat. Don took a moment to observe the way Silverwing moved, how he carried himself with ease. The kid was talented, there was no denying that. But Don's instincts told him there was more to Silverwing than just his aerial prowess. Dr. Gadget, who had been watching the entire display without much change in his expression, finally stepped forward, his cane tapping softly on the ground as he moved. His visor flickered once more as he processed the data from Silverwing's performance. "Silverwing," Dr. Gadget began, his voice calm and steady, "your skill in the air is impressive. Precision, control, and an undeniable sense of showmanship." Silverwing gave a small, respectful bow in response, his smile firm. "But," Dr. Gadget continued, his tone sharpening ever so slightly, "while I commend your execution, it's clear that your performance was designed for flashiness rather than efficiency. You don't need me to tell you which of those two is more important in the real world." The crowd murmured softly, some of the cheers dying down as they took in the criticism. Silverwing, however, remained perfectly composed, nodding in agreement with a warm, almost gracious smile. "Of course, sir," he said simply, his tone respectful. From the corner of his eye, Don noticed Starboy smirking as Silverwing was criticized, clearly relishing the moment. But when Starboy turned to mock his rival, he found Silverwing standing tall, his posture relaxed and accepting of the feedback. The calm smile never left Silverwing's face. The sight made Starboy's smirk falter, his frown deepening as he turned his gaze away. Dr. Gadget, satisfied with Silverwing's response, nodded briefly before turning to the next candidate. Dr. Gadget's cane tapped as his visor flickered again before his gruff voice echoed through the stadium. Next up, a broken bar Phantom Strike. The stadium fell into an almost eerie silence as Phantom Strike stepped away from the group of candidates. He didn't say a word, his movements slow and a bit stiff. His dark hood concealed his face in shadows, and the dark tendrils of his cape seemed to blend into the dimming light of the stadium. Without acknowledging the crowd or his fellow candidates, he simply walked toward the center of the field. His quiet presence was unsettling in contrast to the flashier displays before him. As Phantom Strike approached, the field's configuration shifted. Platforms rose from the ground, and black drones and androids emerged from hidden compartments, moving with mechanical accuracy. Each drone had a glowing red sensor, scanning the area around it with rapid movements. They hovered and darted back and forth, their scanners sweeping the field as if on high alert. The challenge was clear: evade detection and complete the task. Without a word, Phantom Strike disappeared from view, vanishing into the shadows cast by the tall structures surrounding the field. The crowd remained largely quiet, except for the occasional murmur of curiosity or the sound of shifting seats. It was a far cry from the cheers that had erupted during Silverwing's evaluation, but Phantom Strike didn't need applause. Silence suited him. The commentator's voice eventually broke the silence. "Phantom Strike has a reputation for being silent and deadly," he said quietly. "Let's see how he handles this stealth evaluation. He's got to navigate the field without being detected by any of the drones or androids. A broken bar tricky, but not impossible for someone with his skills." The camera zoomed in, trying to catch sight of Phantom Strike. For a moment, nothing happened and just the whir of the drones sweeping the field. But then, one of the androids jerked to the side as if reacting to something, only to continue its patrol. Whir. A brief flicker of movement could be seen just behind it before Phantom Strike vanished again into the shadows, leaving no trace behind. The audience gasped softly at the close call. "He's already bypassed the first layer of security," the second commentator noted, impressed. "I'll admit, his style isn't as flashy as some of the others, but you can't argue with results. The young man is truly skilled at his craft." "Right you are," the first commentator agreed. "If you ask me, he'd make a better secret agent than a superhero. And let's not forget he's the only candidate here who still keeps his identity a secret." The second commentator chuckled. "Adds to his mystery and edge, don't you think?" "I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly why he does it," the first responded with a laugh. On the field, Phantom Strike continued to move through the course, his steps light and precise. He scaled a platform with silent agility, slipping behind an android and disabling it before it could turn around. His movements were fluid, efficient. Each time the drone scanners passed near him, he melted away into the shadows, making it seem as though he was never there. Every now and then, a gasping spectator would react to a near miss, but the silence that followed each close call only deepened the intensity of his performance. Back in the live stream chats, Phantom Strike's fans were showing their excitement. Delaygram, at Phantom Fanatic 88, "Finally, someone with actual skill." Phantom Strike doesn't need to fly around like a show-off or punch like a clown to win. He's out here being a real threat in silence. At Starboy for life, bro, Phantom Strike's just a walking shadow. "What's he gonna do in broad daylight?" asked the Son for Mercy. Thiowas the dot. At Silver-Winged Victory, facts. Without the shadows, Phantom Strike's just playing hide-and-seek in the dark. Silverwing would outshine him literally. Inverted exclamation mark diaresis. At Neutral Watch Dude, can we all agree that Starboy's hair would be the first thing Phantom Strike takes out? That gape ain't hiding nothing. Thy dot. At Silent Assassin Phantom, at least Phantom Strike can get the job done. Silverwing's too busy looking pretty, and Starboy's still in orbit from that last punch. Thio. At Starboy Superfan 69, Phantom Strike can't get the job done unless someone dims the lights. He's just Batman without the budget. White broken bar dot. At Shadow Master Phantom, while Silverwing's out here doing air gymnastics and Starboy's trying to look tough, Phantom Strike's actually completing the mission. Can your faves even manage that? At Wingman Supreme, Phantom Strike thinks he's so slick because he can hide. Meanwhile, Silverwing's flying like a real hero. Keep creeping in the dark, Phantom Boy. Thy at Neutral Rando 21. Imagine needing complete darkness to be relevant. Starboy's fans must be sweating every time the lights go out. A chirper. At Phantom Overall, Phantom Strike doesn't need to fly or punch his way to victory. He's already smarter than both these golden idiots. Efficiency greater than flashiness any day. Thy Z. At Starboy for real. Efficient at what? Hiding? Bet he spends more time looking for shadows than actually fighting. Starboy would kill him in the daylight. No contest. Y' superscript A. At Winged Wonders 98, Silverwing doesn't need shadows to be relevant. Phantom Strike's whole existence is dim the lights or useless vibes. Thy broken bar. At Neutral Jokes to 69. Can't wait for the crossover where Phantom Strike gets hit by sunlight and just fades away like a Snapchat filter. Thy. At Silent but Deadly Phantom, while the others are out here putting on a circus act, Phantom Strike's moving like a ninja. Zero noise, just results. Thy currency. At Star Fury _69, results. He's a walking blackout. The minute the lights come on, it's game over. Starboy doesn't need to hide to fight Aodiaresis. At Flying High _Silverwing, Phantom Strike's great if you wanna sneak around your mum's house after curfew. Otherwise, nah. Thy. At Neutral Burner 14, you're all talking about hiding, but we all know Phantom Strike's just making sure Starboy doesn't embarrass himself a second time in broad daylight. Thy. At Shadow Supremacy Phantom, flashiness isn't everything. While your boys are out here flying and failing, Phantom Strike's over here beating the challenge without breaking a sweat. Thy Z. At Star Loyalist 3000, he's not breaking a sweat because he's not doing anything. Without darkness, Phantom Strike's just a shadow of himself. Thios. At Silver Glory 99, Silverwing could fly circles around Phantom Strike, and everyone knows it. Dude would have a nervous breakdown in a fully lit room. At Mr. Neutral 33, you all ever think Phantom Strike's so quiet because even he knows he's only useful when it's nighttime? Thios. At Stealth King Phantom, Phantom Strike's giving us elite stealth while Starboy's gonna give us another trip to the You're all really out here defending him? At Starboy Defender, talk to me when Phantom Strike fights in a well-lit stadium. Oh wait, he can't. Starboy would body him in actual combat. Aodiaresis Adilla. At Silverwing Shines, if your boy has to sneak around to win, is he even a real hero? Silverwing's out here flying like a boss, no shadows needed. At Laughing Neutral 44, Phantom Strike's got all the shadows but none of the shine. Meanwhile, Starboy is just shining like a sore loser. Thy. Don watched the performance closely, his attention sharper now than it had been for Silverwing. His abilities are eerily similar to mine as Predator, Don thought, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed Phantom Strike's flawless movements. There was a bit of disappointment somewhere deep inside Donia. He'd thought his stealth ability as Predator was something unique. But here was Phantom Strike, using something almost identical, and doing it incredibly well. Well, on the bright side, he noted, once I start getting known as Predator, they'll probably associate it with him. Might make things easier for me. Phantom Strike completed the final task, disabling the last android without ever being detected. The moment he was done, the drones retreated, and the field fell silent once more. The audience, though quiet throughout the performance, erupted in applause. It wasn't as thunderous as the cheers for Silverwing, but it was clear that Phantom Strike's skill had left a lasting impression. Dr. Gadget stepped forward, his cane tapping the ground lightly as he approached Phantom Strike, who returned to his place among the candidates. The hooded figure's expression remained unreadable under his cloak, but his posture remained relaxed, as if the evaluation hadn't taken any effort at all. You are definitely your father's son, Dr. Gadget said with a small nod, his voice gruff but respectful. He's obviously trained you well. Your stealth and precision are already at an elite level. When it comes to operating solo, You're nearly perfect. The crowd gave a soft round of applause, but Dr. Gadget wasn't done. He tilted his head slightly, his visor flickering as he scrutinized Phantom Strike. "Butte a broken bar," he trailed off, raising a finger in the air. "You have overconfidence in your abilities." While your execution was nearly flawless, my drones and androids were nowhere near as alert as they could have been. It's important to remember who made the technology. Most heroes like you and your father are used to stay hidden. A soft chuckle escaped Dr. Gadget's lips, his metallic cane tapping again. "Don't take this as me saying you aren't good, Phantom Strike. You are. But you're still lacking when compared to your father." He paused, allowing the words to sink in. "His powers aren't superior, or his skills are. I can see that you're trying to emulate him, but relying too much on that won't work for you in the long run." Phantom Strike didn't move, his hood concealing any expression he might have had. His body language was hard to read, calm and collected as always, showing nothing in response to Dr. Gadget's feedback. The crowd murmured softly, unsure of what to make of the criticism. Dr. Gadget gave Phantom Strike one final nod before turning away, his cane making the familiar tap as he directed his attention to the next candidate. "Next up, a broken bar." Dr. Gadget's voice echoed through the stadium once more. "Frostbite." The moment Frostbite's name was called, the crowd erupted into cheers, but this time it was clear who was making the noise. The guys in the stands cheered wildly, their enthusiasm louder and more intense than it had been for any of the previous candidates. The first commentator chuckled softly. "Frostbite may not be much of a people person, but she somehow always gets the crowd going, doesn't she?" His co-host rolled her eyes, shaking her head. "I wonder why," she said sarcastically, her voice sounding amused. On the field, Frostbite didn't acknowledge the cheers. She didn't wave or glance at the crowd. She was as cold and aloof as her icy powers suggested. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, her athletic figure wrapped tightly in the frost-patterned suit that hugged her in all the right places. With each step she took, a slight mist seemed to trail behind her, the temperature dropping visibly in her immediate vicinity. The test began as soon as Frostbite reached the center of the field. The ground beneath her transformed into a wide expanse of obstacles, each designed to test her precision and control over her ice manipulation. Large, reinforced dummies were scattered across the area, each one intended to simulate real enemies. Some platforms were elevated, and some targets moved rapidly in different directions, making it a little more difficult. Frostbite raised her hand, her icy blue eyes narrowing as she summoned her powers. A gust of cold air shot forward, followed by a sharp crack as her frost spread across the field like a deadly wave. With a simple flick of the wrist, jagged spikes of ice shot upward from the ground, impaling several of the moving targets in an instant. Crack! The dummies shattered under the force, the crowd gasping in surprise at the sheer power of the strike. Frostbite didn't even blink. Her expression remained frosty while her movements were fluid and efficient as she glided across the field. She moved with deadly grace, forming sharp spears of ice and hurling them with near pinpoint accuracy at her targets, each one landing with a chilling shake. The guys in the crowd went wild with each powerful display, especially when Frostbite struck a particularly dramatic pose while executing her attacks. Wish. In the next move, Frostbite's ice moved swiftly, freezing one of the dummies solid before it shattered into 1,000 tiny shards, sending icy fragments flying through the air. The roar from the male fans was deafening in reaction to this, and in the live stream comment section, the excitement over Frostbite was equally as intense, if not more. A broken bar. Delaygram. At Frostbite's implored 69, Frostbite could literally freeze me in place and I'd thank her with my last breath. The AI Diarrhea. Ad Laymass Simp Watcher, bro, you need to touch some grass, it's just cold powers, not a free ticket to be a simpical thy. At Starboy Rider 01, Starboy's still the GOAT. Frostbite's all show, no go, and Don? He's a nobody who thinks he's somebody. At DonFan 1000, bro, Don sent your golden boy flying like a paper plane. Say what you want, but that's some somebody energy. Superscript A. At Phantom Fan Forever, lol, Don's just another show-off. Phantom Strike could take all these clowns in total darkness. Theo at Silverwing Flexor 88, right, but when's Phantom Strike winning a fight that's not happening in a blackout? Better stick to your little shadow games. Thy Pilcrow Idiaresis Sedilla, at Ice Queen Admira, you all can argue all you want, but Frostbite is flawless. She could walk on ice and I'd slide right behind her, licking the ice trail she leaves behind until it melts. Thy Idiaresis Sedilla, at Real Talk Sally, bruh. Seek help immediately. Thy Chirper at Starboy Fanatic 420, yeah, Starboy may have slipped up, but at least he's not out here just creeping around like Phantom Strike or pretending to be a snowstorm like Frostbite. At Phantom Slayer 87, at least Phantom Strike can handle his business without looking like a Christmas ornament like your golden boy Theo. At Frozen Simp 24, who cares about any of them? Frostbite could freeze my entire existence, and I'd die happy. Idiaresis Sedilla, at Savage Ice Hater, bro. She literally doesn't even know you're alive. Keep that down bad energy to yourself. Thy at Team Silverwings flying circles around Frostbite right now, and you all simps can't even see it through the snowflakes. At Frostbite Fanboy 999, Silverwing could fly into a brick wall, and Frostbite wouldn't blink. That's the difference, bro. She's ice cold. Thy Idiaresis Sedilla, at Neutral Observer 33, the real question is how all these guys aren't slipping on Frostbite's ice with how fast they're falling for her. Thy Mask Book, at Starboy Sucks lol. Who even let Don have fans? Dude just showed up today and you're all acting like he's some sort of Superman. At Don Supporter Newbie, he showed up and humbled Starboy in one punch. That's enough for me. Eyes. At Phantom Lurker 99, Don may be strong, but Phantom Strike would take him out without even being seen. Power isn't everything, folks. At Silver Flying High, oh please, Phantom Strike's only good when he can hide. Put him in the open, and he'd melt faster than Frostbite's heart. Theo is. At Cold as Ice Lover 99, Frostbite could shatter my heart into a million pieces, and I'd thank her for the pain. May Idiaresis Sedilla. At Reality Check 12, bro, your brain's already frozen if you're out here simping this hard for someone who wouldn't even defrost you if you were dying. Thy At Silver Simp Killer, all simping for Frostbite is wild. She freezes you. You'd be in the not on a date. Chilla literally Idiaresis Sedilla. At Frost Simps United, and what a way to go, bro. I'll take hypothermia if it means Frostbite looks at me for 2 seconds. At Roastmaster 98, you're all down bad for real. Frostbite's out here doing ice tricks, and you're all acting like she's about to marry you. Thy At Shadow Strike Master, at least Phantom Strike isn't relying on simps for attention. You all Frostbite fans are wild. At Frostbite Forever 99, say what you want, but she's owning that field. Phantom Strike could never get that reaction, even if he wore a neon sign. At Shade Slayer 44, you're all only hyping her up because of her looks. She freezes stuff, big deal. Meanwhile, Phantom Strike's out here pulling stealth mode boss moves. At Robai 44, this ain't a fan section, it's a first convention. You all need water, not Frostbite. FY Section F. It wasn't flashy like Silverwing's aerial acrobatics, but it was powerful and deadly. Even each move was executed with incredible force behind it, but with enough control to hit targets. There were no wasted motions, no excessive displays of power. She was in control the entire time, and she finished her evaluation far more quickly than the others. When the final target was frozen solid, she simply turned and walked away, leaving the ice-covered field behind her without any grand finale. The thick layers of ice she left behind slowly began to melt as the drones hovering above the field activated heating beams to clear the arena. But none of that mattered to the crowd. The guys cheered loudly as she walked back to her place among the candidates, completely unaffected by her cold demeanor. Don glanced up at the stands, watching the scene unfold as Frostbite's admirers continued to shout and chant her name. He smirked slightly. Can't really blame them. But just as quickly, he shook his head, pushing the thought aside. Let's not give the system many more ideas for impossible quests. As if on cue, a faint prompt appeared in front of Don's eyes. Objective time left, 5 months and 3 weeks. He let out a subtle sigh, brushing off the mocking reminder as Dr. Gadget's voice once again resonated through the stadium. Quite the display, young lady, Dr. Gadget said, looking down at the patches of frost still covering parts of the field. Some of the best raw power I've seen in a young hero. He chuckled softly as he gestured toward the remaining ice, now being melted by the drones. However, you clearly lack control, he continued, his tone shifting slightly. That makes you a danger not only to others but to yourself. Frostbite showed no reaction to his words. Her expression remained neutral, her arms crossed as she stood there, listening but unmoved by the criticism. Dr. Gadget, still smiling, glanced over at Starboy, who was next in line. Well then, next up Broken Bar Starboy. The crowd erupted into a fresh wave of cheers, the stadium replying with renewed excitement as Starboy's name was called. But Starboy didn't move. Instead, he kept his arms crossed tightly, his expression sour as he looked up at Dr. Gadget. I refuse to go before him, Starboy said, his voice loud and clear. I am the main attraction, so he can go first. As he spoke, his eyes shifted to Don, locking onto him with a look of pure contempt. Some parts of the crowd fell silent as they realized who Starboy was referring to, while others cheered even louder, eager to see how the confrontation would unfold. Don stood in place, his expression calm as he met Starboy's gaze. He could feel the eyes on him as Starboy's glares, the crowd's curiosity, even the other candidates watching to see what he would do. But Don didn't react. He just watched Starboy for a moment before slowly turning his attention back to Dr. Gadget. Dr. Gadget's smile didn't falter. I see he hasn't matured anymore since the last time I saw him, he thought, shaking his head slightly. Dr. Gadget then shifted his gaze toward Don, taking a moment to assess him. Dean Sanchez didn't inform me about this one, he thought. But his name keeps coming up Broken Bar. If I'm not mistaken, he's the one Director Graham had me transfer ownership of Winter. He tapped his cane thoughtfully. Well, I didn't get a chance to research him beforehand, so he'll just have to do a standard test like a regular student would. Clearing his throat, Dr. Gadget addressed Don directly. Yes, well, unfortunately, young man, I didn't have time to prepare a specialized test for you, as I wasn't informed you'd be participating today. Is there a specific power you wish to be evaluated on? Don didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his gaze back to Starboy, who was still glaring at him, and smiled faintly. I think it's only fair that the weaker one between us starts, Don said calmly, his voice clear for everyone in the stadium. So Starboy can go ahead. For a moment, the stadium went dead silent. Dr. Gadget's smile froze, the other candidates exchanged stunned glances, and the crowd collectively held its breath. Even the commentators seemed at a loss for words. The moment Don refused Dr. Gadget's suggestion, it was as if a collective breath had been sucked out of the stadium. The crowd, previously screaming with excitement for Starboy, suddenly fell silent, stunned that someone had dared to speak so directly to their golden hero. Whispers quickly began spreading through the stands, but the shock and disbelief remained. Up in the VIP viewing area, Don's reply caused a bunch of reactions as well. The high-profile attendees in the room exchanged quick glances, their whispers low but unmistakably intrigued. Most of them recovered quickly, fixing their expressions and pretending to be unbothered by the bold declaration Don made. Yet, despite their best efforts to hide their curiosity, there was no denying that Don's words had sparked something, if only for a moment. Not everyone in the room hid their reactions, though. Miss Claire, sitting with her usual grace and poise, allowed herself a smiley one that was both alluring and approving. She didn't bother to disguise her satisfaction, the subtle curve of her lips sending a message of quiet confidence in her client's decision. Beside her, Dean Sanchez was in the midst of composing himself, still recovering from the initial shock of Don's boldness. His expression had shifted from surprise to a forced neutrality, though the uneasiness on his face remained. And just as he seemed to regain control over his appearance, he spotted Mrs. Dugati moving toward them. The sight immediately made his stomach drop. She looked visibly angry as she approached in quick long strides, only stopping once she reached in front of Miss Claire. She placed her hands on her hips, and looked down at Miss Claire with eyes that burned with frustration. "What does that nobody think he's doing?" Mrs. Dugati demanded, her voice low but sounding quite venomous. Miss Claire didn't bother to look up at her. She instead casually picked up the glass of sparkling water beside her, bringing it to her lips for an elegant slow sip. After savoring the cool liquid for a moment, she finally responded, her tone as calm and smooth as ever. "I'm not familiar with this nobody you speak of," she said, the words escaping her lips like a perfectly calculated dismissal. Mrs. Dugati's eyes widened in disbelief, her knuckles tightening against her hips as she grit her teeth. "Who do you think you're talking to?" she spat, her voice rising with barely concealed anger. Setting her glass down gently, Miss Claire raised her head slightly, though her gaze remained indifferent. "A woman who thinks the world revolves around her," she answered in the same unbothered tone, "when, in fact, the only things swirling around her are delusions. One such delusion being that I don't see her for what she really is, loud, obnoxious, and bitter." Dean Sanchez's mouth fell open in shock, his eyes darting nervously between the two women. He wasn't alone either. Everyone in the VIP area had now taken notice of the confrontation. Though they all pretended not to care, their glances and whispered exchanges told another story. All eyes were, in one way or another, fixed on the exchange between the two women. Mrs. Dugati's face flushed with anger, her entire body trembling as if she were about to explode. "How dare you!" she began, but before she could finish, a low, smooth male voice cut her off. "What seems to be the problem here?" Dean Sanchez was the first to turn toward the voice. His eyes widened, and he immediately stood up, his hands nervously fumbling as he straightened his jacket. "Chairman!" he exclaimed, sounding both nervous and surprised. I didn't know you'd be coming." A broken bar. Dean Sanchez extended his hand eagerly, but the towering figure before him ignored it, his gaze fixed elsewhere. The man standing before them was a striking presence. He was taller, easily towering over the others at about 215 km, with broad shoulders and a muscular frame that was evident even beneath the designer suit he wore. The suit itself was unique, a deep crimson in color, with elegant patterns inspired by traditional Chinese fashion. The high collar and intricate embroidery gave him an air of regal authority, as if he were a leader from an entirely different era. His face was as impressive as his physique, here sharp, angular features with a strong jawline. His skin was of a fair complexion, clear and smooth, and his dark, almond-shaped eyes conveyed both warmth and power. His black hair was neatly styled. Mrs. Dugati's expression shifted instantly. Gone was the barely contained rage now. She looked more irritated than angry. "Mr. Xiao," she acknowledged curtly. The man smiled, his expression warm and approachable, though the power behind it was undeniable. "Just William is fine when we're not conducting business," he said in a kind, polite tone. Despite his outward charm, it was clear to everyone in the room that he had no interest in Mrs. Dugati's greeting. He had brushed past Dean Sanchez and Mrs. Dugati without a second thought, his attention fully focused on Miss Claire. "Oh, our broken bar, Miss Claire," William Xiao said, his tone coming out as light and pleasant. "So good to see you. And here I thought you said you had absolutely no interest in the superhero business." His laugh was charming, almost disarming, but the atmosphere in the room remained tense. Everyone had fallen into a strange silence, their nervous glances cast in his direction as if afraid to draw too much attention to themselves. Miss Claire remained calm, her demeanor for most part unshaken by the chairman's presence. She took another sip from her glass of sparkling water before replying, "I made an exception." William Xiao nodded approvingly, his smile widening. "Ah yes, Don Bright, what an interesting broken bar child he is." Mrs. Dugati scoffed at the mention of Don's name, her irritation flaring up once more. "The only thing interesting about him is how he has the gall to try and outweigh Starboy at this ceremony," she said. her voice one of annoyance. All because he thinks he won in a scuffle where Timothy wasn't even serious. She crossed her arms, her expression smug as she continued. It doesn't matter either way. According to Timothy's contract with the school, he will be the main event. Mr. Xiao smiled at her comment, his tone still warm and unaffected. Of course, he agreed. Starboy will remain the main event. But before that, I believe I should have Dr. Gadget provide all the candidates with a special opportunity. Miss Claire's calm Section 8 faltered for a fraction of a second. She frowned slightly, though she kept her head down so it wouldn't be immediately noticeable. What do you mean by that? Back on the field, Starboy clenched his fists tightly at his sides, his face practically red with anger. Don's calm demeanor only seemed to have pushed him closer to the edge, and it looked as though he was just moments away from erupting. Before Starboy could say a word, however, Dr. Gadget raised his hand, gesturing for both of them to calm down. Now, he said, his voice resounding through the stadium's speakers. No need to get heated over such things. How about a... Dr. Gadget abruptly stopped mid-sentence, his head tilting slightly as he pressed a hand to the earpiece in his ear. His expression then darkened, his eyes narrowing as he listened to whatever message was being relayed. What? He muttered, his tone shifting from calm to frustrated. But we agreed that a broken bar. The crowd grew quiet, watching as Dr. Gadget's expression soured even further. For 15 long seconds, the entire stadium seemed frozen, everyone waiting for him to continue. Finally, he lowered his hand and turned his gaze toward the VIP viewing area, his eyes locking onto something or someone up above. Don, sensing that something was amiss, followed Dr. Gadget's gaze. He focused his superhuman vision, zooming in on the private viewing section. There, he saw Miss Claire sitting calmly in her seat, her poise unaffected by the sudden change in Dr. Gadget's demeanor. Sitting beside her was a man Don didn't recognize at all, well-built, and wearing a striking red suit. Behind the man stood Dean Sanchez, his posture awkward, almost as if he were some sort of assistant or attendant. Who is that guy? Don wondered, narrowing his eyes slightly. He didn't have much time to ponder the thought, though. Before he could draw any conclusions, the man in the red suit, Mr. Xiao, turned his head and looked directly at Don, his dark eyes meeting Don's with unnerving precision, despite the distance. The man gave him a warm, almost disarming smile, and a polite nod. Inwardly, Don was surprised, though his expression remained unchanged. He returned the nod and quickly shifted his gaze away. Starboy's dad, maybe? He thought, though the idea didn't quite sit right with him. Before Don could think too much about it, Dr. Gadget's voice interrupted his thoughts. The professor had called over his hovering disc, which moved toward him smoothly, lifting him off the ground as he floated above the field. Beneath him, the various testing mechanisms that had been used for the evaluations began to retract back into the ground, vanishing as if they had never been there in the first place. The candidates exchanged confused glances. Even the commentators fell silent for a moment, their excitement from earlier giving way to confusion. The stadium now had people murmuring as they watched in bewilderment. What's going on? Starboy muttered under his breath, his arms crossed tightly as he glared up at Dr. Gadget. Don remained still, keeping his hands at his side as he watched the scene unfold. Something was clearly about to happen, and judging by Dr. Gadget's earlier reaction, it wasn't part of the original plan. Once the field had been cleared, Dr. Gadget extended his hands out, signaling for the crowd to settle down. His voice, amplified by the stadium speakers, boomed out. "Apologies, everyone," he began, his tone slightly strained but still professional. "We will be diverting from the main program for a special challenge." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, the confusion clear as thousands of spectators exchanged puzzled looks. But Dr. Gadget wasn't finished. "You see," he continued, "for the past decade or so, superhero mortality rates have been on the rise. Many of you may not know, but I have long advocated for androids to be deployed in the field alongside human heroes. My goal has always been to reduce the number of young lives lost in dangerous missions. Androids have already proven their worth in the military and other industries, and now a broken bar." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. Now it's time for them to join the ranks of heroes. The stadium was dead silent. Even the candidates seemed caught off guard by the sudden shift in the program. Starboy's scowl deepened, but even he seemed unsure of how to react. With the efforts of some of the world's most brilliant engineers and scientists, along with the full support and funding of SHU, Dr. Gadget continued, his voice more serious now, we have developed the world's first ever superhuman android prototype capable of rivaling a class A superhero. The weight of his words settled over the crowd like a thick blanket. The mere mention of an android with the potential to rival a class A hero sent waves of shock through the audience. For a moment, it was as though the entire stadium had forgotten how to breathe. Dr. Gadget sighed softly, glancing at the field below where the last patches of ice from Frostbite's performance still lingered. We had initially planned to unveil this after the main ceremony, he explained, his eyes narrowing slightly. However, Mr. William Xiao, chairman of the school, has proposed a special challenge for the candidates here today. The moment the words left his mouth, the crowd began buzzing again, their confusion slowly turning into excitement. Dr. Gadget raised his voice, addressing the candidates directly. The challenge is simple. To any candidate who can defeat the android prototype in open combat, a reward of 20 million credits will be provided by Mr. Xiao himself. Boom. The stadium exploded with noise. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, the excitement in the air reaching a fever pitch. People were on their feet, shouting and cheering as they tried to wrap their heads around what they had just heard. The first commentator, after several moments of stunned silence, finally found his voice. Did you hear that, folks? An unexpected turn of events, but one the crowd clearly welcomes. His co-host, equally surprised but now grinning with excitement, added, welcome might be an understatement. Ecstatic seems more appropriate because that's exactly how I'm feeling right now. A superhuman android? What does that even look like? I don't know, the first commentator replied, his voice rising with enthusiasm, but we're about to find out. Meanwhile, in the live stream comments sections, users were going wild as well. Delaygram, at Hero Watch 2024, 20 million credits. Bruh, this is about to get wild. My money's on Silverwing for sure. He's gonna take that android down. Seth Yen. At Phantom Lurker 88. Silverwing bro's gonna spend more time posing than fighting. Phantom Strike's the only one with the skills to actually win this. At Starboy Fighter for Life, you're all tripping. Starboy's the one who's gonna win. He's Class B already, one step away from A. That android doesn't stand a chance against him. Superscript A. At Roast King Supreme, Starboy couldn't even handle one punch from Don. And now you think he's taking on a Class A android? Mouse stop it. At Silverwings Shining, Silverwings' agility is unmatched. Dude's gonna fly circles around that android. It won't even know what hit it. How Diaresis Sidilla Diaresis. At Phantom in the Shadows, Silverwings' flashy moves aren't gonna help him when the android turns him into a pile of scrap metal. Phantom Strike's gonna vanish and win with Stealth thy currency. At Star-powered Stan, Stealth, the android's probably got sensors better than Phantom Strike's whole skill set. Starboy's gonna tank the hits and wreck it. White Broken Bar Sidilla AATMI Diaresis Sidilla. At Neutral Observer 99, you're all really thinking these guys stand a chance? Don's the only one who's gonna walk away with that 20 mil currency. At Simps for Frostbite, can we just give Frostbite the prize already? She's gonna freeze that android solid and collect the bag. AI Diaresis Sidilla. At Phantom Fanatic 77, LOL. Imagine thinking ice is gonna work against a machine. This isn't a snowball fight. Frostbite's gonna be useless against Tech Thy. At Silver Superior 99, honestly, the only thing Frostbite's freezing is her chance of winning. Let Silverwing handle this with some real skill. Broken Bar. At Clown Zone 2024, you all forgot Don already? Bro's just standing there, ready to cash that check while you fight over losers. A chirper. At Who is this Xiao dude? Wait. Who's this Mr. Xiao guy? Just pulling 20 mil out to nowhere like it's pocket change? At Rich Boy Info, bro. That's William Xiao, second richest man in Asia. His family's been rolling in money for generations. Dude might actually be richer than you think. Sidekick agrees. At skeptical Stan, yeah, but can he fight? Bet he's got bodyguards doing the heavy lifting while he throws cash. At Informant 2024, he doesn't need to fight when he's practically buying entire universities. That man's loaded. At Icy Heart Simp, I don't care about the android. Frostbite's gonna slay, and we're all gonna watch her take that cash in style. Thyn Pilcroth item. At Shadow Master 46, nah bro, Frostbite's gonna shatter just like that last dummy. Phantom Strike's too smooth for this challenge, he'll have it handled. At Starboy for the win. Silverwing and Phantom Strike better get ready to sit down. Starboy is about to make history with this android fight. No contest. Thyn. At Neutral Burner 33, Starboy is about to make history. I'll write a broken bar, the first history of getting whooped twice in one day. Thyn'. At This Is Nuts, 20 mil just for beating some android? Yo, I'd fight it myself if I could. Let's go. Thyn. At Rich Guy Flexer, bro, you're forgetting this android rivals a class as superhero. You'd get turned into a pancake in 5 seconds. Thynz. At Don is the one, bet Don could handle it. You all saw what he did to Starboy. Imagine what he'd do to an android. At Star Loyalist Xoxo, Don? Starboy is about to give that android new definition of go. My boy's winning it all. The candidates on the field exchanged glances, some of them visibly taken aback by the sudden challenge. Even Starboy, who had been fuming just moments ago, seemed momentarily distracted, his eyes narrowing as he processed what Dr. Gadget had just said. Don, for his part, remained still, his mind already working through the implications of the challenge. A superhuman android, huh? He thought, his eyes flicking briefly toward Starboy. Well, this just got even more interesting. The stadium was still filled with the excited screams of the crowd, their excitement only growing after the announcement of the superhuman android. Yet on the field, the candidates remained largely unmoved, only exchanging cautious glances as if waiting for someone else to make the first move. No one wanted to jump in blind, especially with something as unpredictable as an android meant to rival a class A hero. Dr. Gadget noticed the hesitation and, with a faint sigh, raised his voice once more. A reminder, he said, his tone slightly firmer, the reward will only be given to the first candidate who defeats the android. He paused, his eyes flicking briefly back toward the VIP viewing area. Don caught the subtle gesture, but he couldn't quite make out the meaning behind it. Something's off here, Don thought, his instincts tingling. This new piece of information had clearly shifted the dynamic on the field. The candidates had been waiting, biding their time to see how dangerous the android truly was before committing, but now the urgency had changed. Only the first victory would be rewarded, which meant hesitation could cost them the prize. Silverwing showed a sly smile in response to this information, while Starboy's frown deepened further. Thunderclap, who had been visibly irritated a moment ago, now looked more determined, his muscular arms crossed tightly over his broad chest. Frostbite and Phantom Strike, on the other hand, remained impassive, their expressions unreadable. Don brought a hand to his chin, feigning deep thought as if considering the challenge. In truth, his mind was already working through the possibilities, assessing the risk. Dr. Gadget, sensing that the candidates were now showing a bit more interest, continued his explanation. Each candidate will have 3 chances to fight. You may call for a timeout during the battle, and that will count as 1 attempt. This new rule seemed to boost Thunderclap's confidence immediately. His irritation vanished completely, replaced by a growing eagerness. He unfolded his arms and shifted his stance slightly, rolling his shoulders as if preparing for a fight. 3 chances, huh? He muttered, grinning. I only need 1. Meanwhile, Phantom Strike and Frostbite still stood silently. Silverwing, who was twirling a strand of his long silver hair between his fingers, moved his gaze towards Starboy with a mocking gleam in his eyes. 3 chances? They're being generous, Silverwing said lightly, his voice sounding amused. Must be for your sake, Timothy. You know, after that little broken bar humiliating debacle of yours earlier." Silverwing's words hung in the air, and the crowd fell silent, their attention shifting towards Starboy, anticipating his reaction. Silverwing's gaze turned darker, more sinister, as if daring Starboy to explode in front of everyone. Starboy's jaw clenched and his blue eyes narrowed as he met Silverwing's gaze with a vicious glare. But even through his anger, Starboy kept his composure. He was too aware of the thousands of eyes on him, the cameras broadcasting his every move to even more people watching online. No matter how much he wanted to lash out, he knew this wasn't the time. Still, Silverwing's words hit their mark. Starboy's humiliation from earlier lingered in his mind, the sting of losing in front of so many people still fresh. And although his reputation hadn't taken a fatal blow, it was enough to make him furious. He couldn't afford to let that stain on his record remain. Without looking back at Silverwing, Starboy turned his attention to Dr. Gadget and spoke confidently. "Bring it out. I'll only need one round to finish this." The bold declaration caused the crowd, which had begun to simmer down, to erupt once again in wild cheers. Starboy's arrogance had reignited their excitement, and they shouted his name in support, eager to see him back up his words. Thunderclap, unwilling to be outshone, stepped forward and crossed his arms, glaring at Starboy with a challenging look. "Who says you get to go first?" "I said I'd challenge it before you," he growled. Silverwing, still amused, chimed in with a playful smile. "I suppose I'll join as well, why not? If I win, I'll even donate the money to the less fortunate of this beautiful city." The crowd roared even louder, moved by the drama unfolding before them. The commentators, who had been momentarily taken aback by the sudden challenge, quickly jumped back in. "Looks like we're about to see something very exciting, ladies and gentlemen," the first commentator shouted enthusiastically. From somewhere in the stands, a loud voice suddenly yelled out, "I'm non-binary." The commentator paused, chuckling. "Apologies. I meant to say, ladies, gentlemen, and others." His co-host forced a laugh and added, "It'll be a real exciting show." On the field, Silverwing glanced casually over at Frostbite and Phantom Strike, his smile lingering as he sized them up. Neither of them seemed particularly eager to jump in, but Silverwing's gaze eventually landed on Don, his eyes gleaming with expectation. It was as if he was waiting for Don to make a move, to step forward and add fuel to the already fiery situation. But where others saw an opportunity, Don saw an unnecessary risk. His reputation had already been elevated after the earlier exchange with Starboy. There was no need to risk that momentum on a challenge with unknown variables. "The whole thing smells too good to be true," Don thought, his eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced toward Dr. Gadget's hovering form. "If this android is really Class A, I'd be a fool to rush in without watching it first." Don remained still, his arms crossed loosely as he observed the others. Silverwing's smile faded slightly when he noticed Don remaining in place alongside Frostbite and Phantom Strike. A look of mild disappointment crossed his face as he sighed, muttering under his breath, "How boring." He then turned his gaze away from Don, clearly unimpressed. Starboy, who had been scowling ever since Thunderclap and Silverwing stepped forward, glanced at Don as well, his expression filled with contempt. But he didn't say anything, quickly turning his focus back to the challenge. Dr. Gadget turned his attention to the remaining three candidates still standing in their positions and asked, "I take it you three won't be competing, then?" Don shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. "If the ones who've agreed to participate fail, I'll give it a try." He said it casually, without any trace of malice, but something about the way he spoke made both Thunderclap and Starboy frown. Thunderclap's eyes narrowed, while Starboy's lips pressed into a tighter line. Silverwing, on the other hand, raised an eyebrow, as if intrigued by Don's quiet confidence. Dr. Gadget nodded thoughtfully at Don's response. "He's smart not to want to go first, with their level of experience. I doubt any of them will succeed," he thought, before letting out a soft sigh. Clearing his throat, he addressed the three candidates who had agreed to participate. "In that case, each of you three will pick a number from 1 to 3. The selected one will go first." Almost immediately, Starboy spoke up, his voice loud. "1!" he yelled, not even giving the others a chance to react. Thunderclap, still frowning from Don's earlier comment, scowled and growled, too. He crossed his arms defiantly, scoffing as if to say that he didn't care about the outcome. Silverwing simply shrugged his shoulders, his usual playful demeanor back. "I guess that makes me 3, he said, his voice relaxed. Dr. Gadget nodded and gestured toward the large jumbo screen at the far end of the stadium. A massive 0 was displayed, glowing brightly. "And the 1 to start will be Broken Bar." His voice trailed off as the numbers on the screen began to randomize, cycling rapidly between 1, 2, and 3. The crowd watched in anticipation, their eyes glued to the screen as the numbers slowed down, eventually coming to a stop. The final number was 2. Dr. Gadget then finished his sentence. "Number 2 Broken Bar." Thunderclap,